that's part of just my life journey. That's all.
But you're so young too. You're not even 30 yet.
Yeah. It's a lot of way.
I miss being in my 20s.
It's a lot of fucking way to go. It's a lot of way to go. I think 30 is gonna be like, I don't know. I think 30 is gonna be lit. I think 30 is gonna be like the years. You know, it's gonna be the best years of my life for sure.
So do you know where in South Florida you're gonna live? Because you're not gonna live on Miami, like South Beach and stuff like that. You're probably gonna live towards
there. So yeah, I'll probably dig that.
So Midwest, you've been a Midwest guy. I know Detroit, Motown Phenom. One of the great nicknames in the sport, by the way. Love that nickname. You've been in the West Coast.
Yep.
I know you've been in Canada.
Now South.
Now you're going to the Southeast. Like,
yep.
Someone who could pick up a different lifestyle and live at a different portion of the country. Like, that only adds value in so many different aspects of life.
And I feel like it's gonna, it's gonna elevate me a lot. My uncle told me when I was like a kid, something that I always kind of admired about him. He said he's a chameleon. He said he can blend in wherever you need to get in, he can fit in, and I kind of have adapted that a little bit. I'm trying my best to stop the boundaries between people, I grew up very black or white. He was either black or he was white, and since I've become an adult, I've constantly just tried to stop looking at the world that way. And I think by experiencing these different forms of life, that's the only way I'm going to be able to do it.
And I do know a lot of people like to say where traveling helps you grow because you learn so much about different people, different cultures, and everything.
Yeah, Miami is totally different too. It's not even like
it's its own world.
even Vegas is different. Like, we're both not from here. She's born and raised here.
Yeah. Miami is different.
This is different, but Miami is like a different level. Country,
It is.
And just prepare for the traffic.
Yeah. I know.
But you have your Tesla.
What's crazy is I've been there maybe like for the last 9 months. I've been there on and off like a lot. It just seemed like everything kind of lined up for this promotion to be down there too. So I've already experienced that fucking traffic is no joke.
Oh, it's terrible.
Yeah, I'm bringing my Tesla down.
When I was in LA, it makes LA in a way seem nice.
Yeah, that shit's terrible.
Does your Tesla
expensive as fuck? It's crazy.
Yeah.
Do you still make your Tesla like it drives itself, or I feel like I saw that video a few years ago.
Yeah. I can't wait for the new one to come out.
The video he put out where he's playing video games while you're driving.
You still do that?
Yeah, hell yeah. Every day. On my way here, I did that.
Wow.
What do you mean? Yeah,
Which game?
Not today. I didn't play the game, but usually Super Smash Brothers. Yeah, I'm usually into Super Smash Brothers. I'm not gonna go far. I can't wait till they release like some AR goggles. I think Apple's making some next year, so you can play the game while you drive.
You played Smash as a kid. Did you play Mario Kart?
Yeah, a little bit.
I like Mario Kart more than Smash.
Really? Mario Kart more than Smash?
Yeah. Well, because in Mario Kart, I would do battles more than I would do races, and Block Fort is like a nostalgic level. For anyone out there listening knows about Mario Kart and Block Fort.
Yeah, I don't know Block Fort, but I fuck with Mario Kart.
All right, I figured you
Mario
would.
Kart heavy,
I figured you would.
But over Smash, I don't know, bro. We gonna debate on that.
But okay, fine. But going back to what you were saying about being a chameleon, and just going with it, it's almost like you have to take yourself out of the equation, your background and everything like that. Just try to blend in as a chameleon to observe what the hell's in front of you and what's going on. To me, that's just the learning process right there. That's the entertaining part, is just learning, oh, it's like that, huh? Okay, I see.
And then you figure out different ways to entertain people
100%.
too,
100%.
The great thing about fighting is it's a universal language. We don't have to say nothing, We just go out there and anybody can understand it, right? Maybe not the ground game. And it takes a while. It takes a while for people to kind of get that part. Especially when you see like guys like me and Charles Oliveira like on the ground. It's like you got to really understand it to get it. But fighting's universal, and I think at some point we got to learn how to entertain all different types of people. Some people like that big bravado, talking shit and all that. Some people like the more Canelo Alvarez type of approach, and there's many different ways to
what,
entertain
slapping
people.
Caleb Plant?
Yeah, that was pretty good, huh?
That drove up
pretty
the
fucking
pay-per-view
good.
buys, yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty fucking good too. Good two-piece. I only hit Chiesa with one. He hit him with two.
And then Masvidal
Fast
got
as fuck.
3 against Leon
Yeah.
Edwards.
Yeah, but I don't know. We don't count that.
Okay. That's true. That's true. No, that's you brought up his name too, Oliveira. I feel like him fighting you is what, put him on this map to being in that conversation to have the interim fight, at least at that time, for the interim, or not the interim.
No, he fought,
vacant.
Vacant, yeah.
Yep. After me, he fought Tony. I knew he was gonna smash Tony too. His level is just way too above on the ground. And then then fought for the vacant title.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's there's a lot of things surrounding that fight. I want that fight back, but we'll see. We'll make that happen in the future at some point. I got to prove I'm the best at 65 first, and then at some point maybe we'll make that fight.
What would you have done differently?
To prepare for that fight,
Yeah.
it took more time. Took more time for sure. After I fought Gillespie, I needed some time off. I needed some time to let it sink in, and instead I just rode the wave and I was talked into riding the wave and going into the next fight.
Okay, so then back up to the fight for Gillespie, because that's where arguably you look the best anyone's ever seen you. So
Appreciate
what did you do for that fight and that made it like you have to take time off after that fight? Where you mentally felt like you want to take time off, but you rode the wave and listened to those people to go for it further?
What leading up to that fight made me?
Yeah.
It was that moment. That moment was so big that I knew I had to let it sit in. It was my first real camp with Faraz, so I felt like we learned a lot about each other in there. And I was just trying to get my feet underneath me in Canada and in Montreal. But then I had to go back home to kind of handle some stuff here in Vegas. But then I took that fight and it was like right back into it. It was like right back going up to Canada in the middle of winter too, which it had been 6 or 7 years since I had dealt with the winter. That's another layer
I don't
on
want to
top
know
of
how
it.
cold it is.
That's why I did my 18 years in Chicago as a kid and I got out.
Yeah. So it was a lot to deal with on top of that. They flew me to Brazil on one day and then back, and all this happened within a 5-week span of getting ready to fight somebody like Oliveira. And I think part of it was I underestimated Oliveira until midway through the second round. Then I was like, oh, this dude's legit. Fuck.
I remember
Right.
I remember you flew overseas to do like a face-off with him at
Yep.
some point before the fight. Where was that, and what was it like facing off with him in that moment?
That was one of the craziest journeys that I had ever. Like, it was a 2-day trip, 40 hours of flying, but because of the time difference, it took place in like a day. I flew there on a Monday and I was back by Wednesday. And they just, I don't know, it was weird. It was strange. And it was during the whole Corona thing, but we didn't know that it was Corona yet, the general public.
What month was that?
It was January.
And that was in Brazil. So
No, it was February. I'm sorry. I took the fight in January. That was February. Maybe February 12th, something like that, in Brazil.
So the world shut down the month later in March.
Right.
You fought, was it the 14th?
Right.
It's a day after my 30th birthday, which it never felt like I turned 30 on March 13th night because the world shut down.
Yeah, he still gets mad at me
I
because
don't
he's
get
like,
mad at
you
you.
didn't do anything for my 30th
No,
birthday, but
no.
it's because the world
It was-
shut
yeah,
down.
it shut
Yeah,
down,
I
huh?
couldn't do
I-
anything.
So when's your birthday? March
13th.
13th.
So it's the day before
Yeah.
your fight. So, no, we made up for it. We were gonna go to Horseshoe Bend. We were gonna
I had to
hike and all that
cancel
stuff.
everything.
We ended up doing that following Thanksgiving, right before that Thanksgiving.
Okay,
So I
okay.
stopped caring. She just brings
Until
it up
then,
to tease
sure.
me. She just brings it up to tease me.
I feel you. But it was, like you said, it was a pandemic, It was, what could we do? But I think it started way before that. These big companies and all these, the world kind of knew before we knew, I think.
Before we accepted it.
Yeah. Really, I didn't accept it until like fucking June, probably,
It's crazy because you were technically the first
I
fight.
know.
You and
Yeah.
that's the first fight
I'll
of
never
the entire
forget that.
pandemic. Because you can say what we saw in Jacksonville when it was Tony and
Justin Gaethje.
Gaethje.
Mm-hmm.
And other people fought too, obviously, but
Yeah.
I remember that fight specifically.
Mhm.
But like your fight was technically the first fight, and didn't you do it in an empty arena in Brazil?
Yeah, and it was supposed to be full.
Do they have
and
masks
they came to
on?
us 3 days before. The people.
Yeah, that were there.
Honestly, it's hard to remember.
I know.
I get tunnel vision. It's. I don't remember seeing anybody else but Charles that night.
I can understand.
Mm-hmm.
Well, speaking of
I
Charles,
don't think nobody had masks though. But
I
people
wouldn't
did
know.
have masks before.
Yeah.
well, I think Charles, when we spoke like 2 weeks ago about kind of what's next for him, and I know Justin Gaethje has been talking about or been deserving. David's laughing now. or
No, I
smiling.
know what you're gonna say. I'm laughing.
Yeah, well, no, because I heard in an interview recently that Charles said he may be waiting for Connor.
I knew that's what he was saying.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, what do you think about this whole lightweight situation?
can't-
And we have Beneil versus Islam
Yeah.
next.
And
or
they
2
can't
months.
give Connor off of his losses a title shot.
Yeah.
Like that would delegitimize anything. If I'm Justin Gaethje, like what he said, he'd throw a dolly or something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe I read that. I would go scorched earth. I'd
Yeah, I
burn the
think that
place
too.
down.
If
He's
he
the
was
most
Gaethje,
deserving. If I'm
yeah,
Gaethje, I'd burn the
Gaethje
place
is most
down.
deserving.
He is.
But part of me want to say they should give it to Connor. Part of me thinks that Oliveira kind of deserves that. He's been in the sport a long time. He's got a lot of fights. I respect the man.
He's got the records for like most submission victories
Yeah.
for sure.
And he's got a lot of. I think he's got the record for most fights before actually getting a title
Yeah,
match too.
that's true.
Yeah, and he's got
Um,
more records than that, but that he does have
Yeah.
as well.
And he doesn't have that much. He just don't have it in him to get that big. So he's got to make the name off of somebody.
Well, here's the
But
problem.
let's just be real.
Let's
about
just be real. He can't speak English. If he could speak
Right,
English, it'd be
right,
completely
right.
different.
Yeah.
Like if he could do this,
it. Yeah, but if he can, I think it could make him a huge hometown, home country, not town. It'll make him a hero if he beats Conor McGregor, right? Conor beat Jose. I think Brazilians still feel some way about that. I think they're still kind of bitter about that. Let's go ahead and give it to him. And honestly, Conor's not really gonna earn it. Conor's not gonna beat Darush or.
then my advice to Oliveira, if that's what he really wants to do, get a dictionary or just memorize it. Call out Conor McGregor in English. How could they say no to that if he says it in English?
I guess the way I'm looking at it is from the UFC's perspective, and it's if you want to make the most bang for your buck, which is what the UFC's business model is, then you make Charles and Conor happen
In
by
Brazil,
any means, by any means.
in Brazil, for him to have redemption in front of his people.
Yep.
I don't know which city it was. Was it Sao Paulo? Was it the other one? I have no
Or,
idea.
Rio, one of the-
Rio
or
de
Brazil,
Janeiro?
Brasilia, I think is the capital. That's where I fought him at. So
Okay.
maybe give that.
Wherever city it was, give him the
Do it in
opportunity
a soccer
to
stadium.
rematch. That works too.
Do it in a soccer stadium.
Go to the go to the nearest soccer stadium to that arena.
Let's do it.
They fill it up.
Of course. Okay.
I think that'll be huge.
That's
I think
business.
it's business. It is business, and if they really want to get as big as possible, I think they would probably do that. Conor and Charles, 2022. If not, what do? You do Charles and Gaethje. That's gonna do decent. Charles gonna beat him.
Well, if Charles,
They're doing
okay,
decent.
okay, so then why can't Charles fight Gaethje and then after that he fights Conor? If you think Charles is going to beat Gaethje, or are you too afraid to risk that?
Why make Charles do it again? Why make him do it again? These last 2 fights that he's had, he's put a lot of damage on his body. A lot. He's taken a lot of damage. So why?
Who had a better opportunity to win that fight against Charles, Chandler or Poirier?
Chandler. Yeah.
Because of what he did in that first round.
Yeah. And he just, I don't know, it just seemed like Charles got more confidence about him after that fight. So it'd be really hard to beat him now.
I've never seen him celebrate like that after the Chandler
I
fight.
know.
That was personality.
Yeah,
You didn't see
he's
it.
got it.
He's got it, but if he knew English.
You think the English thing is gonna stop him? Yeah.
It's not going to stop him, but it's like it could only help him in this market.
Mm-hmm.
He'd be a star.
You have to be huge in America. You know,
So,
even to be,
so
that's
what?
why they brought
Why
Ego
is
over here.
Izzy huge? He's got a great personality, and he speaks English. He's not from America. Same thing could be for. I'm not saying same thing because Izzy's his own personality. Izzy's larger than life.
Yeah.
I mean, he's getting the rightful roses that he's earned, but like, Oliveira could do that if he spoke English.
He could, but it's not gonna happen.
Probably not.
Let's be real. Let's be
Yeah,
honest. He's not gonna. If he wanted to do that, then he would have to move to America and, you know what I mean, kind of understand our culture a little bit.
Why fix what's
I
not
don't
broken?
see it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't see that.
Let him
I
do
don't
his
think I don't think that's him as a person. You know, like for me, like I like to always travel, right? I like to move and kind of blend in. I think he is set in who he is, and that's how he should be. It's cool. You know, let him.
You didn't sign with Habib's promotion. Where would you have signed?
One was one of them. Honestly, I probably would have went. I would have probably did my own thing.
What does
do you
that
mean?
mean?
Probably did my own thing. I would have started my own promotion if I did. That's the day before I actually did the signing and did that press conference. We were talking about doing my own thing, but this made more sense once we hammered out some of the finer points of the contract.
Well, down the line, would you still want to do your own thing?
Yeah, at some point, you know. I think eventually we will become our own promoters, as we should. But that's a whole side to the game that is very complicated, and you got to put in just as much effort on that side as you do to the actual fighting side. So for now, I can be a full-fledged fighter. You know, I can focus solely on the punches and the kicks and the shit like that, and leave the promote to somebody else. But at some point, yeah, why not?
It's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Hey, as we wrap up the year 2021, as we wrap things up at the Schmo Zone podcast, you're a fantastic guest. What do you want to leave the world with as lasting thoughts for the year of 2021?
The lasting thoughts, year 2021. Going into this new year, I don't know, I just want to embrace like individuality. You know, I think each one of us is so different and so unique in our own paths and our own ways and our own come ups, and like you are the only one with your story. Like, let's embrace that. Let's get away from the bullshit of the world and what you're supposed to be, and you're supposed to act like this and you're supposed to be like this. Like, no, just be you and be individual, and then it's gonna raise everybody up. You know, I think the more you can just be open and just be free, it'll raise everybody.
And hopefully we'll see you with a new tooth soon. Right?
hopefully not, because that means somebody knocked my shit out.
That means someone punched him in the face.
Yeah, that means somebody knocked
but
my
I
shit
know
out.
how bad you
But,
want it.
Yeah,
so-
I do. I want it to happen.
Or just
I do
get
want
a
it to happen,
dentist
but-
to pluck it out.
That is a fantastic
No,
icebreaker.
No, I can't have the dentist do it. It's gotta be
So numb it.
somebody's gotta knock the shit out. But
My dad practiced
hopefully-
dentistry for like over 30 years. You'd love hearing that.
Yeah, tell them. Ask them how. What's the best way? Do they hit it like solid with my mouth open,
I'll text
or
it to you.
do they hit the jaw?
I'll text it to you.
All right, yeah, please. Yeah.
I don't know if you want the jaw though. You don't want
No.
that.
No, I don't know.
You
but
don't want
what's-
the
but-
chin.
Of course not. But I mean,
Let's avoid the chin.
I'm just saying, how do you knock the tooth out?
We'll figure it
You
out.
have to hit me on the nose and then.
Remember those old cartoons? You just tie a rope
Yeah.
to it and someone just loses. No, that's great. No, but to your point though too, I like the embrace and individuality.
Stay true
We
to
all
you.
live one life. We're all adults. No one has the answers. We're all faking it till we make it. Not really faking
That's
it.
a fact. That's a fact.
Yeah,
That's a fact. You don't figure that out till you get older.
You
but
create
yeah.
your own path. You
Yeah.
blaze your own trail. But not everyone can do it. Not everyone is willing to put in the work to do it. But
Mhm.
those who are shall be rewarded. That's
Fact.
a good way to put it.
Mhm.
Episode 89 of the Schmo Zone podcast.
Love it. Love it. The Schmo Zone. The Schmo Zone. I love it. Yeah, you guys are creating something big here. I like it.
Appreciate you.
We are out.
of bad vibes and bad feelings. And this is
Yes,
one of the
they
things.
are.
But this is one of the things that makes people toe the line.
Right.
The fear of this kind of altercation, the fear of this kind of like you don't want that from inside your party, so you start using they and them. You start thinking that everyone should be able to use any bathroom that they feel like they identify with. You start going along the line. It's one of the more interesting things about politics is that if you tell me that you're a Republican, I can kind of guess your stance on God. I can kind of guess your stance on being pro-life or pro-choice, Second Amendment rights. It's like all those things sort of fall in line, and it's very interesting. It's very interesting how you sort of adopt, not you, but people sort of adopt a whole group of things when you decide you're a Republican or you decide you're a Democrat.
Right. I don't, but see, I don't think I fall into that.
How do you feel about guns? You got any of them?
What?
Got any guns?
Yeah.
How many you got?
One.
Just one?
Yeah. I'm not a big gun guy. As far as abortion, I don't want to say pro-choice, but I'm not pro-life. One of the big reasons is if you like, I got a dad who's dying of Alzheimer's. Watching him, it's the saddest thing. If I could kill him tomorrow and put him out of his misery, I would.
I think you could take him to Oregon. There's states that allow that. There's states that allow people to. I think.
Can I go over state lines with them? Is it like taking a teenage girl over state line?
No, there was a girl who was dying of cancer who went to Oregon for that very reason. Yeah, Oregon is one of those. I want to. I might be saying it wrong, but I think the idea is a right to a dignified death.
No, you're right. Just read about it.
Yeah. Look, man, the idea that you're supposed to just keep staying alive until your fucking heart stops beating when you're
silly.
in horrible pain.
Silly.
It's evil. Don't do it to your. I had to put my dog down. Okay, I love this dog. I've had him for 13 years.
No.
I had to put him down because he couldn't walk anymore.
What do you do? Choke him out?
I brought him to a place. You know, they actually came to my house actually, and they put him down. Sad shit, but you can't do that for a 98-year-old man who's falling apart. You have to let him eventually stop breathing.
Right.
You know, it's
which is sad.
horrible.
All the rights should go out the window. That should be your first right. It's your goddamn life.
Yeah.
So that's why I couldn't be like pro-choice, pro-life or whatever. And I got girls pregnant when I was younger, and I was glad there was a Planned Parenthood, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Or the guy in the alley with the stick. I think his name was Dick. But I don't. But in showbiz, Joe, you know how it is in showbiz because it's a pretty liberal business. If you're right on 2 of 10 issues, you're like a fucking Nazi.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well, I get called alt-right adjacent. It's my favorite.
Oh my God, they keep coming up with.
Yeah. Well, you can't call me alt-right because I'm pretty left-wing on most things.
Yeah.
They call me alt-right adjacent. Probably because I have people like you on. Now I'm going to be more alt-right adjacent.
Because you, isn't that silly? You have me on to, your listeners probably, you're like, listen to this guy. I don't agree with anything. That should be a feather in your cap, and they're going to hold that against you.
Yeah.
Which is silly.
Well, it's not rational. But again, it's people trying to have an effect on you. They're trying to have an effect. They're trying to make some waves, trying to do something. They're writing blogs or creating videos. But they're doing it to try to put pressure on you. It's interesting, though. It's weird from a psychological perspective. You're looking at it from the outside. It's disconcerting when it's happening to you, but when you can step back and look at it, like it's interesting. It's like these systems are opposing each other, and they're trying to figure out where the weaknesses are and how to push to affect the other side.
Yeah, and it's not just left right. It's bigger than that.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the book I read? What's the place where they go to meet every year?
Bohemian Grove? Bilderberg Group?
Bilderberg Group. That was one of my favorite books, The Truth About the Bilderberg Group. And what goes on there and the powerful people that meet. And people always say, there's probably 10 guys in a room that run the whole fucking... Well, okay, but just show me them. Until then, I'll stay in the left-right fight and have fun.
Right. The idea is that there's 10 guys that control everything, and they don't give a fuck if it's left or right. They're just about money.
But the Rockefellers were involved.
Yeah.
But it's weird. That was really creepy. They planned shit out decades ahead.
Yeah, they planned out education.
Yeah. Decades ahead, though. And it comes true. Like, they write a sitcom script that last for 15 years with plot points. It was, that book was incredible. I can't remember the author's name, but yeah. But I don't mind. I used to sit at that table at the Comedy Cellar. That's how Tough Crowd came about. Me and Patrice yelling at each other about racial shit.
Tough Crowd was a great fucking show, but I really am worried that you couldn't have a show like that.
I
today.
know. You should be.
Yeah.
Now let me ask you, and I'm not taking left, right, but who would be to blame for that? That's why I lean right, and I think, and you do in some areas, you're an artist, you're a stand-up. I cannot vote with a party that is for censorship.
Right.
And for groupthink.
Did we ever find out what's going on with Dennis Prager? Did we get a line on that?
Is that still bothering you?
No, it does bother me because I like the guy.
He's great.
I don't agree with him on a lot of things, but
Yeah.
he seems like a very nice guy, and I like Adam.
I do too. Both those guys. There's a lawsuit. He's bringing a lawsuit that they think it's going to go a long way. Because they were labeling his show as hate speech. Maybe it's back up or whatever, but I know that story. You can find that anywhere.
There's a real concern that the ideologies behind these tech companies all go in one direction, and they have the overwhelming control of the narrative because of the fact that they're all where we're getting all of our information. Most people are getting it on their phones. Most people are getting a lot of their media on their phones. Like Netflix said, something like 50% of the people that watch my special watch it on a phone. That's amazing. I mean, that's crazy that people are. So all this stuff is coming from these tech companies.
Doesn't that kind of bother you that it's the phone? Because when I hear that, not that it matters with my specials, but when I picture somebody watching something on a phone, you don't have their full attention. They're doing other things. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? As opposed to sitting in front of their computer or their TV.
Yeah.
Does that kind of bug you? You put all that work into it, and they're on the subway watching it. And then
I don't pay attention to what I can't control.
I don't. It makes me nuts.
Yeah, I gotta get over that. That's where the mushrooms come in.
I'm gonna have to try those.
Try a little one. I'll give you a little one, just a one stem.
Not today. I gotta drive to San Diego.
Oh, it's perfect.
Me in traffic?
Yeah. Whoa, you
on
gotta
mushrooms?
drive. What time is your show?
I know. I'm fucking gonna be.
What time is your show?
7:30. It's 4. I pulled it up on Waze. It says if I leave at 3, it's gonna take 4 hours.
Oh, you better leave at 2 then. It's almost 2.
Are you kicking me out of here?
No.
What did I say
Listen,
wrong, Joe?
You didn't say anything
was
wrong.
Was the coffee?
But
did
no,
I get
just
too
drove there last week for Brendan Schaub's special. He shot a Showtime special.
How long did
it took me 5.5 hours to get down there. Took me fucking forever.
I thought you might be flying. I was gonna bring it up before the show. I thought I saw you had a show there tonight.
My manager
thought maybe he was flying.
Oh, my manager thought he was doing me a favor.
Well, just pull it up in Google. Just pull it up
on
in the
Waze
map
right now.
Yeah, well, Google will do it too. If you just Google.
I'm a Waze guy.
Where is the gig? Where you at?
Comedy Palace.
Hey, ladies, don't punch him. Now you know where he is. Don't show up.
I
and
know
go,
you're gonna throw that in my face.
Motherfucker. You racist piece of shit. You fucking sexist. You hate women. Feminism is not cancer.
Oh, it is. It's a uterine cancer.
It's the future. Females are the future.
Well,
the future's feminine.
I'll take my life tonight if that's the case.
That one.
Filthy whores. Anyways. Fucking hairy, thick-ankle girls who can't get laid and they turn their anger.
Some of them are pretty.
I haven't met a stripper who's a feminist yet.
Oh, wow.
And I've talked to almost 2 of them in the last 40 years.
At 3:45 right now. 3 hours and 45.
3 hours and 45 minutes.
About 6 o'clock if you leave right now. So
if you leave right now, you get there an hour before the show.
You kicking me out, Joe?
No,
what did I say?
No. I think.
Don't make me come across
what
the table.
I'm nervous about, and I'm just being honest. What I'm nervous about is that it's going to get
worse,
exceedingly longer in the next hour.
Do you understand? It's making me nervous that you're nervous. Because I was the one who was gonna have to get out of here a little early. I thought you were gonna go. You'll be fine. You'll fucking get.
Dude, I got down to San Diego on Saturday night. I was delirious. I've been smoking in fucking fumes. The fumes from the highway because everything was stop and go the whole way.
You still might want to try to catch a flight if you can.
The only thing that saved me was.
I'm not going to the fucking airport. I'd
Run
rather
the
walk.
Jewels.
That's the day
I would rather walk.
Run the Jewels was the only thing that saved me. Just rocking out my car. It was a horrible drive. Yeah.
Well, the whole world lives here. Of course, it's gonna be horrible.
No, the real Americans live in the middle, don't they? Jesus land.
Yeah.
Flyover states.
I'd rather live in Ohio.
Where do you like to work? Where's like your favorite place to perform?
See, that's where I'm gonna get you. San Francisco.
I love San Francisco.
I'm kidding. I haven't been there in years. They loved me when I was in the
They do
competition.
because some people are happy that someone's like bucking the trend.
That's right. Well, that's how it used to be, but that's how left wing and then fucking stupid they've turned into. Bobby Slayton could have run for mayor of San Francisco, right?
Yeah.
Does he still play up there a lot?
I have not seen
They
Bobby
loved
in
me. I almost won
forever.
that competition. They had me at the Punchline twice a year for like 3 years.
I love the punchline.
And then all of a sudden, no go.
No
but
go.
I don't. What's tough? People always say, I bet you killed down south in Atlanta. No, those people, they all have guilt complexes about being racist and bigots. So when you do something off color, they're laughing under their cowboy hats.
What about like Cleveland?
Cleveland's a tough one for me. They don't have I don't know. My sarcasm's almost they're almost too Midwest for me. You know what I mean? Honest to God.
Really? What about Columbus?
I don't do Columbus.
Why don't you do Columbus?
I don't know. Artie Lang got in trouble for fucking doing black jokes there. So I don't do black jokes. I'm just saying. I don't know.
So Artie Lang got in trouble there. So you're like, oh, scratch that one off the list.
The bouncer,
Too dangerous.
a black bouncer complained because he did a black joke. I'm like, oh, that sounds
Artie
like a great
Lang?
club. Yeah.
Which club is this? The Funny Bone?
Yeah.
It's a great fucking club.
I know. I'll get there.
Get over there.
I will.
Go.
I'll get there.
All right.
No, because it's changed a lot since.
Well, I just said because I thought it's.
I want to do small theaters, Joe. I don't want to do clubs.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I'm doing this to cover the cost of coming out here tonight. Okay. And I'm doing Ventura Harbor Comedy Club because
Oh, that's a good spot.
It's fun.
That Chinese restaurant?
Well, no, it's an actual club upstairs.
Yeah. It's a Chinese restaurant.
It is not. It's a comedy club.
I worked it.
What do you mean a Chinese restaurant?
It's connected to a Chinese
Well,
restaurant.
they have Chinese food there. Oh, it's connected to a restaurant.
It's
Well,
not-
don't make it sound like I'm standing in the kitchen.
I worked there. I
Well,
told
the
you I
Mushi
worked there
Pork's
too.
coming
What
up.
the fuck? It's a good spot.
I love it. So I'm doing that Sunday
I'm
night.
not scared to work at Chinese restaurants.
Is this coming out? This is streaming live, right?
Yeah.
So Comedy
People are gonna
Palace.
come see you.
I'm counting on it because I did no
Bunch of girls
radio.
are polishing their knuckles right now.
Good. I have 2 knives in my car. Can I bring that samurai thing? Can I bring that 1,500-year-old sword?
I want to give you some sort of protection. I don't want to give you a weapon.
Oh, please. I can do 12 deep knee bends. Nobody's going to fuck with me.
Wow. What about?
Come on. You got to admit, for 57, I'm hanging
You
in there.
look good,
I'm
bro.
hanging in
You
there.
look- especially for no hormone replacement.
I know.
Trying to get you on the sauce.
You don't think that's my first call?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll hook you up. I'll get you to a doctor. They'll take care of you. Figure out what your blood levels are at. Get you on the right
Can it
vitamins.
be a doctor
Get you
near
off the
me in
fucking
New York,
cigarettes.
right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
There's a lot near you. Got to get you off of these, though. Get you onto these.
What do you got there?
Marijuana.
Yeah, I know. I heard.
Scared of the marijuana.
Doesn't it help you go to sleep or something? Aren't you one of those guys?
No, I can't handle. Remember, I took 1/8 of an edible. It was like doing acid for me. I was watching Bob Newhart, and all of a sudden I was in this fucking show, and it was in black and white, and my wife was not my wife, and my house was not my house. I got all this. So this is from a little bit of an edible.
Those are strong. They're making them strong. They're doing horrible things to people out here. But now they have new rules where each edible has to be 10 milligrams, which is that's doable. But here's the thing. Ain't nobody measuring those fucking things.
How about the CBD
Technically
shit,
are,
Joe?
but yeah.
CBD's great.
I know. I
Yeah.
went into a bar in New York, and the bartender pushed it on me. They were like, he had like a campaign going, and the problem was I'd already had a couple drinks, so I couldn't tell, but I slept good when I took it.
Yeah, CBD's amazing.
Yeah?
And, yeah, some of it has a little
That's
bit
more
of
my
THC in it,
speed.
but it's very little. Most of it is very little, but it's really good for your joints and for aches and pains
Yeah.
and inflammation and stuff like that. For a lot of people, it's good for anxiety, you know?
I don't have any of that. I'm as cool as a cucumber.
Wow, amazing. Even with the cigarettes, amazing.
That's what keeps me cool.
What about Texas? Do you like work in Texas?
Yes.
Yeah.
I got to be honest. I haven't been to these places in a while, but yes.
What? You don't go to Texas?
No, I did. I was in Dallas, and some of the jokes that make people cringe elsewhere were getting rounds of applause. In Dallas, anytime I said Jew, just not in a hateful way, but
If you say Jew and it's
but I
not
say
in
it
a
in a
hateful
nice
way,
way.
it sounds hateful.
It does sound.
That's
Isn't
a
that
weird
weird?
word.
Louis does a bit about that. And I used to ask Louis when we lived together. I go, how come we first moved to New York? I said, I hear people saying, yeah, he's a Jew or whatever, and nobody gets mad and stuff. Because in Boston, if somebody said, yeah, fucking Jew. But Dallas was great for me. So
Dallas is great.
Oh, my
Houston,
God.
Houston's great. Austin's great. Texas is the shit.
Houston, I
live
did an
there.
album in Houston.
This one-
Austin,
Did you do it at the Laugh Stop in River Oaks?
Yes. Yeah.
I did an album
Is
there.
it there no more?
No, it's there. Not there
That
anymore.
was. Well, that
Apparently
was
the
Bill
building
Hicks's
is still
club.
there. Yeah.
What is it now?
They
Yo,
use it
TCB?
sometimes. Like they'll have shows there sometimes. I think someone had something there for a while. I don't know the full story, but that was one of the greatest clubs ever. Laugh Stop in River Oaks. Remember that crazy dude was running it? Fuck's his name?
Yeah.
Fuck's his name? Bald guy.
Yes.
Mark.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That
He
was
had an
mine.
Italian last name.
I forget.
Oddly enough.
Joey knew him real well.
I forgot about that
Yeah.
dude.
Yeah.
Yes, and that was Bill Hicks'
Yeah.
place.
They had a fucking legit open mic.
Open
night,
mic
too.
in the fucking.
Yeah, in the front
the
bar
front part.
area. And it was legit, like
Yes.
good comics.
I watched it. I
Yeah.
go, these kids are open mics.
Yeah, they were
Something
good.
about Houston, right?
Yep. Houston is a very eclectic city. It's really different. It's not what people think of when they think of Houston. They think of like cowboy hats and oil.
No.
It's
No.
not. It's very diverse. There's a lot going. It's very urban. There's a lot of cool shit going on in
Yes.
Houston.
You can't attack that now. Javenpack.
very artistic. I'm a big fan.
Yeah. Same with people always go, oh, you must kill in Atlanta and shit. I'm like, no, they're PC. They're cosmopolitan areas for the most part.
Yeah, you don't kill in Atlanta?
I kill if I want to. But some of the shit that some of the stuff you think would kill, it's like, even for us down here.
Right.
But cosmopolitan areas is more,
What about Phoenix? Phoenix is a good spot.
Phoenix is good.
That's a great spot. Yeah. There's a few great spots. If you didn't live in New York, where would you live?
For comedy purposes, just
for life and comedy.
For life and comedy?
Yeah.
Burlington, Vermont.
Really?
No, I'm kidding.
Be up there with fucking Ben and Jerry.
No, I would.
Knocking on Bernie's door.
Where would I? Boy, it has to involve comedy. Probably Texas.
Really?
Yeah, somewhere. My brother lived outside of Dallas, and he loved it.
That's great.
Would you have money? You could have 7 castles.
Ooh, 7. I don't want 7. Too many to look after.
Folks, you should see the place where they're doing Joe's show.
Yeah.
The gym outside's worth.
It's a nice gym. I like Texas. I'm a big fan of Texas. I'd live in Texas. I think I'd live in Colorado first, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Weed.
Not just weed, mountains.
You like the mountain?
I love the way what it does for you. There's something about being around mountains that I was actually reading something about this. That there's an actual thing that happens to people when you're faced with immense natural beauty. That it diminishes your ego and yourself, and it puts people in
puts you in a hang glider,
a more
and then you cut an album.
Spiritual perspective. Being around mountains, it's humbling.
Sure.
You're around them. It's beautiful. It's like the best looking art you could ever see. It's like a gorgeous mountain with some green hills and the sun coming out of the clouds. Like that's good to look at as anything that's ever existed.
Like I'm not very religious. I don't know. I haven't made up my mind. But when I see stuff like that, is when I get kind of.
You want to make up your mind? I got something right here for you.
What is that?
Mushrooms.
Mushrooms.
That's where the mushrooms are.
I know. That's exactly what they're for.
Make up your mind.
How about Joe? If I can you imagine if I took these and did this show before?
Just take a little one like this.
No, fuck that.
Nobody's got to get hurt. Just a little one.
Jamie, would you do that?
Just a little one.
I don't want to be giggling in the car on the way
You'll
down,
be fine.
throwing up on myself.
You'll be fine.
What's it do? What's going to happen?
We'll
I
find
want to
out.
get out of here before it takes effect. Guy's going to get me in a fucking some type of scissors.
It should be legal. It's supposed to be
I
legal
believe
everywhere.
that. It would make people mellow the fuck out, right?
It would.
Open that third eye, man.
It would do something really good for people. The problem is you forget you take it sometimes. Like an hour and a half later, you're like, why am I so weird? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't want to be that far in my own head. That's scary.
Have you ever done the float tank?
No.
You want to do that? Well, you can't. You
I
don't have
can't.
time.
I gotta float to fucking San Diego.
Good to see you.
I should go
All
down there
is
on the
well?
raft like everybody else does.
Last time I ran into you.
I am so nervous that you get nervous about me making my show. Do you understand?
Yeah, I think we're going to get you out of here in about 15 minutes. That's what I think is
All
the
right.
right move.
Is that all right?
Yeah, I think that's the right move.
Maybe 10. You guys got me really fucking nervous now.
I wish I wasn't, but at least you have Waze. Waze will put you on some weird fucking funky backcountry routes that'll cut 20 minutes out of it.
I'll end up in Mexico.
You'll be fine. Very close to Mexico, but super conservative. That's what's interesting about San Diego.
I used to.
You know why?
My first album I did in La Jolla.
Military.
Yes.
It's all military
right.
down there. Yeah. Safe as fuck.
Yeah. Maybe I'll have one of those guys at my show tonight.
People have said to me, like, where would you live in a military town? Like, yes. That's a good
Christ, yeah.
place to live. You're going to have gyms, for sure. You're definitely going to have gun ranges.
When you say that, is that when they throw you into the alt-right adjacent category? Stuff like that.
Probably. Yeah. I mean, the American flag behind me probably contributes to that,
Oh,
too.
my God. How horrible.
I know.
You're a fucking extremist,
I'm,
Joe.
a
What next? The
colonist.
Constitution?
Decolonizing. That's one of my favorite things. Decolonizing. You've been paying attention to that expression? People want to decolonize certain things.
Like what?
Oh, like hairstyles and shit.
Decolonize a hairstyle?
Yeah. You're not. Yeah. There was a guy who got kicked off of a show.
Is
This
these the mushrooms
hilarious.
talking already?
No. There's a guy who got kicked off of a show. He was on a show. I think it was in Montreal, and he had dreadlocks on, and it was this. He's apparently gender fluid. which I guess means
I dabbled in that.
yeah, you can go back and forth between being a man and a woman, but he does have dreadlocks. So they kicked him off the show because he's a white guy with dreadlocks, and he defended their position. And one of the phrases they used was about decolonizing specific hairstyles and taking them away from white people and giving them back to the people that
Oh, that's sort of appropriation, is what they're accusing.
cultural appropriation.
Yeah.
Hairstyles.
I'd like to go with dreads as a 57-year-old Italian.
You'd be weird. You'd be weird with dreads.
I'd get famous just from that. That and a white goatee. Colin Quinn says I should wear a black. He says I'm gonna
turtleneck. Steve Jobs.
A black turtleneck with yellow lightning bolts and call myself Don Corrado.
Why? Why Don
He's just
Corrado?
being funny.
I heard he has an amazing new show.
That guy.
His show
I'd watch
about-
him work it out, man.
It's all about politics. It's about what we're talking about.
About red versus blue. It's so
Yeah.
timely
Yeah.
and shit. And you know, he's a craftsman. I watch him. The Fat Black Pussycat. I go on sometimes. I have a show after his.
What is the Fat Black Pussycat?
You'd fucking love it, Joe. It's right around the corner from the Comedy Cellar. It's got a real bohemian feel to it. People sitting in couches. There's lamps. It holds about 75 people. Colin was, of course, quick enough and smart enough to say, I'm using this every night to work shit out. And people know. You can say, look, I'm only charging you $5 because I'm going to be working new stuff out. But you would love it. It's kind of a
sounds like I would
bohemian
love it.
feel to it. And and they give you the door. Not that fact has anything to do with you. But it's great. It's you know, you do an hour of your I smoke
Wow.
sometime. It's so fun. It's so again, it's like 75 seats. There's a
The
little
fact that you
little
can do an
balcony.
hour is very attractive. So New York has some weird little clubs, man. It's really interesting how New York has it. Because guys are just hopping around like that. When I lived in New York, I could never afford to live in the city. So I lived in New Rochelle. And when I did gigs, I was like, well, I could work in town and do 10 minutes or 15 minutes. Or I could just go on the road and do a gig in Connecticut or do a gig in Jersey and make actual money. And so I always did that. So even when I lived in New York, I hardly ever worked in New York.
Yeah, I don't as much anymore. I used to go to the Comedy Cellar every night, but Louis made that place world famous.
Yeah.
And it used to be a room where you could work shit out and take your time, but now it's a fucking tourist. It's packed. It's still a great club, but I feel like you outgrow that. I don't want to go on stage unless I'm doing at least 40 minutes.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I got to get something done. 15-minute sets don't. That's why I still do the Fat Black Pussycat, which is such a great thing. So
Look at that. Nice.
yeah, that's it.
Nice little spot.
That looks big. You know, it always looks bigger from a picture. It's tiny. That's that's from the balcony up there. Which
So is it like the belly room at the store?
It's smaller than that.
Really?
Oh yeah, way smaller
Wow.
than that.
Well, it's only
way
70
way
people.
smaller than that.
The store is 70 people upstairs, so it's basically the same.
Oh, the one way up.
Belly
you
room.
mean?
Yeah. The little one.
Not the original room. I was thinking
Right.
the original.
Okay. Yeah.
I would say like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's you'd fucking love it, and people are sitting in couches and shit.
Wow.
It's really cool, and Noam, who runs he couldn't be nicer, you know. And that's the only one I really do in the city.
Really?
Yeah, I'm like you. I'd rather go to Governor's or somewhere else and do some real time.
Governor's a great club.
Yeah.
The other thing about doing like clubs where there's a lot of people on, where you're only doing 15 minutes, the good thing about it is that it's not your crowd. So you have to make people laugh that are there
Yeah.
just to see comedy. They're not
Yeah.
just to see Nick DiPaolo.
Right.
Like if you go to, you know how that happens to some guys, they develop their crowd and then they kind of lose their edge.
Yes.
Fucking, it's scary, right?
Yes.
Dude,
Yes.
last time I saw you on stage, I walked into Caroline's. I was just in town for something, and you were on stage. It was a late show, and you were doing some fucking joke about Katrina, that they spelled help wrong.
On the roof. You know how many people died because they couldn't spell help? Guy looking down from a helicopter says HEP.
Yeah.
I said, if you want HEP, just step in that water you're standing.
You know, I was fucking crying, laughing. I'm like, Nick is just still swinging from the hip the same way.
That's my favorite joke. That stage is still one of my favorites in the country. I don't do Caroline's.
Do you know the problem with Caroline's, though, is when they reduce the stage down to the size of a fucking shoebox?
Yes, but you're absolutely
It's
right.
adjustable.
Yeah, But like on a Tuesday or Wednesday night with like 60, 70 people in there.
It's amazing.
It is my favorite. I was so comfortable because I played it so much when I first moved to New York. I could stay up there for 3 hours. I got so much done. I wrote half specials on that stage by doing like Tuesday nights for a year.
Oh, yeah.
That's where you get it done.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You're right. Like 60 people in the crowd, fucking around.
Isn't that not the fucking... I did some little place up in Canada, Niagara Falls, the Corner Comedy Club. I mean, a real hole in the wall. Shitty tables and, fucking just cheesy.
Yeah.
Had the best time of my life.
Well, when a place is big, then it becomes a show.
And you have to do your act. You have to work tight.
Yeah.
Which stifles creativity.
Yeah, that's
right?
what one of the reasons why Ari, when he does a store, he'll sign up for like late night and he'll get on like at 12:45 or some shit like that, and there's 20 people there. And I always say that that's like truth serum, because if you do your act in front of 20 people, you know what sucks. Like there's no confusing what sucks. It's right in front of you.
That's right. That's right.
You feel the terribleness of your material.
You don't need 250 people to tell you suck. It takes 4 couples who are paying attention.
And you feel it. Like you can kind of song and dance your way through a couple of hundred people.
That's right. Because you're exactly right.
Yeah.
A barometer, always said that. Give me just double figures. Give me 15 to 20.
Yes.
That is enough. Right?
It's great to work out material.
Of course.
It's great to cut out all the horse shit in your act,
Yeah, because if there's only 15 people in the room and 7 of them don't like the joke, you feel it.
Yeah. The 15, if someone was sitting there with their cross arms, staring you down, like, yikes.
That's where the work gets done.
Yeah.
I used to hate playing Carolines, and this is ironic, but this is when I was, had Comedy Central specials, and I was kind of hot, and I would sell out Carolines. I would hate it, though, like 2 shows on a Saturday night, because it's packed, and I know I have something called the asshole quotient. For every 20 people in the club, there's 1 asshole. So if there was like 250, somebody do the math.
So you got more assholes.
Yeah, that was my
Larger
rule.
crowd.
So you have to work fast and tight to keep their attention.
Right.
As opposed to taking your time on a Tuesday night in front of 60 people, and the real funny comes out.
Yeah.
When you say shit in between your proven bits, there's the gold.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it comes out of nowhere. It's like it opens up. When you put yourself in that frame of mind too, when there's only 30 people on midnight or something like that, you're putting yourself in a different frame of mind. There's no pressure.
Now let me ask you that's it. Can you do that in front of a full room? I can't put myself in that mentality.
It's hard.
Because you have to work differently. I feel like that I'm being a pussy and giving in. But I know damn well if I work as slow as I do in front of 40, 50 people, in front of 250 or 300, somebody's going to get anxious in the audience. At least that's my... that mentality, like you said, when you show up with 50 people, it's almost like fucking around in somebody's living room.
Yeah.
And I want that feeling in front of 300 people or 400 people.
It's always different. We were talking about that last night, that like when you do a large theater, it's so much different than doing a club. Even if you do a packed club of 500 people and then you move to a place that's got 5,000 people, it's just a different feeling. It's a totally different feeling. You have to do the air quotes act. You got to do your act,
5,000.
Yeah. It gets weird. Large numbers are weird.
Yeah.
Timing's different. You can't hammer the punchlines like you can in a club. Like in a club, you go punch. You remember Gavin would hit punchline after punchline, tag, and those tags would just have everybody roll.
Oh yeah.
Well, if he was doing 10,000 people, those tags would get drowned out in the laughter of all the people around you.
I tried tagging when I did like my first Tonight Show. I tried tagging, and like I said, got lost.
They're in Burbank.
However, but you don't tag like you're in a club.
Yeah.
I remember learning that lesson, TV.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. Gavin was rapid fire, and I remember watching him at Nick's. I came in when I first started coming, and I step in the door. He's on stage, and I'm like, "Is he dying?" Everybody was doubled over in the audience. I thought he was fucking dying. All of a sudden, you couldn't hear any laughter, and all of a sudden a huge roar. I mean, because he would tag, like you said, a joke 11 times.
Yeah.
And people are still dying from the laugh. They were literally bent over. Nothing was coming out of them. I'm like, he was shaking the rafters.
Couldn't breathe. Yeah. I think we got a chance to see some guys that are probably some of the best comics of all time, and people don't know. I think between Sweeney and Gavin and Lenny and those guys that we saw when they were in their prime in
Kenny
the 80s.
Rogers.
Yeah, Kenny. When we were coming up, those guys were in their prime. And when we were young, we got a chance to see, I think, some of the greatest of all time.
No doubt about it.
But they got stuck.
Well, the guys at Knicks put him on a contract for a while. Remember?
They gave him good money and coke.
Yeah, they were making. I remember Gab telling me they were making $3,000 a weekend and not having to leave your city.
Yeah.
Making road money and like you said, some perks on the side.
Free booze.
Free, all that.
Yeah, all that.
But
they all live great.
Oh, did they ever? But in the long run, you know.
Well, in the long run, it was a problem, but we got to see some crazy fucking. I remember some of those nights at Nick's Comedy Stop where you watch those guys get. I remember Sweeney killing so hard. Yeah. You almost wanted to quit comedy.
I know.
Like, there's no way I could do that.
Well, I had to follow the fucking guy. Gavin would in Boston back then. If Don Gavin show, he would be the host.
Sweeney.
Remember? No, Gavin would be the host.
Yeah, he would start off the show.
Yeah.
That was a different thing about Boston, too, right?
That's right.
Like, if you did the Nick DiPaolo show at Nick's Comedy Stop, you'd start off the show.
That's right. And what was crazy, it was great for young comic, but I had to follow Gavin, doing a tight 15.
Jesus.
So it made me, fucking, you had to be able to hold your own.
Yeah.
And they talk at 100 miles an hour, plus they're coked up, and they're really funny.
They're really funny, and they got heavy Boston accents, and they're big men. They're like big, imposing people.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And they would destroy some guy who came in. I remember Ronnie Gold from New York, just done his first Tonight Show and shit. And he was coming to Nick's for the weekend, and everybody was dropping in. Gavin would do 10. Chance Langton went on with his guitar and literally get like a standing ovation. Here's Ronnie Gold. 5 minutes into it.
Cricket.
Angry fucking Irish kids with their blonde eyebrows.
Yeah.
You fucking suck.
Yeah, I remember that.
That was a tough room if you were having a bad set.
Well, they would do it to the people on purpose.
Blood.
They would do it to anybody from out of town that had a big attitude and a Hollywood resume. They did it to Billy Crystal. They lit Billy Crystal up in that room.
Well, that I understand.
They did it to everybody, though. It was crazy to watch.
Well, yeah. They were like, these guys, we're as funny as them, and we're going to punish them. And they would.
You know who they didn't do it to? Dom Herrera.
Exactly.
Dom Herrera went up there like a fucking champ and just rode the wave.
Yes, he
just kept that wave
He's
going.
That funny.
Yeah.
I went on Comics Come Home a couple of years ago. No, not the last one, the one before that. And Dom had to close the show. And it was a murderer's row. Bobby Kelly, fucking me, Billy Burr. Taking the roof off the dump, and I'm like, Dom has to close this. And he's as funny as anybody, but I'm just saying, how's he gonna? He goes up there, and he did something self-deprecating. Gets a nice look. Within a minute and a half, he had them, and there was no drop-off. There was no drop-off in response. I went home. I didn't realize he was that fucking good.
Oh, he's still that good. Dom Herrera has not lost a step.
Brilliant, funny
I see
guy.
him at the store all the time. Yeah. Quit drinking. Told me to quit drinking for 2 months. Very happy for him.
Yeah, well, I saw he has hands with like shaking.
He has a nerve issue.
Yeah.
It goes from his shoulder all the way down to his arm. Yeah.
Mushrooms.
That'll help him or hurt him?
Hurt him. That's what he said.
Oh, shit.
He told me that's what.
God damn it! Now that you brought it up, fuck, dude, we better get you out of here. Look. I said before, anytime.
Joey,
come on by.
I would. This show is as powerful as anything out there, TV, radio, and that flight just makes me mentally ill.
I get it.
I fucking almost started crying halfway out here. I just got a guy next to me sucking on a straw like a 6-year-old with ice in his glass. There's nothing in it. Ooh. It's 110 degrees.
On the plane?
Baby behind me screaming like somebody was using the soft spot in his head for a fucking ashtray. I can't make this shit up. I was almost crying. But you know what? I got to come out here more than once.
Yeah.
Every 2 years.
Yeah.
If you'll have me.
Come out. Yeah. And next time, I got a show tonight at the Improv, but anytime.
I know.
Anytime you want, come do a show with me. We'll do it.
Be in traffic with the rest of the world. Can I plug a couple?
Yeah. Tell anybody where you are.
My podcast. Just go to nickdip.com. And Monday through Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern, it streams live for free on Monday and Wednesdays. And I just shot a thing called Stickmen in October. It's about an instructional baseball clinic. That you know Adam Ray, the comedian?
Yeah.
He's in it.
Okay, cool.
Andrew Parisi wrote it. And Andrew's partner already sold some stuff to Netflix, so we're hoping. And it came out killer. It's called Stickmen. It's really testosterone driven, so you'd fucking like it. NickDip.com for my show. Tonight at the Comedy Palace. Sunday night, Ventura Harbor Comedy Club / Chinese restaurant.
It's a good spot. Good
I know.
Food.
It's fucking awesome. And what am I forgetting? I know I'm forgetting something.
Instagram and Twitter, all that stuff.
Instagram and Twitter, but go to nickdip.com. The show's growing leaps and bounds. I'm shooting a special in March at Cohoes Hall in New York. I think I'm just going to put that one out there. Use what you told me. Just flood the market with it. Not even charge people.
Just flood it.
Right?
Flood it. Let
Get it
people know
out
how
there.
funny you are.
Because my stand-up is still my thing.
I hear you,
All right?
brother.
Love
Thank
you, man.
I love you too,
love
brother.
you, Joe.
Always good to see you.
Same here.
Nick DiPaolo, ladies and gentlemen. Woo! I'm so nervous.
All the results.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Boom! And we're.
That's very
Yeah, a guy named his online Twitter or his Instagram handle is TGT Studios, and he makes these. I actually had one made for Elon. Elon Musk loved it too, so we made him one. He made one with like this very beautiful red wood. Yeah. And those are, what are those things made out of, Jamie? Some diodes or something? Nixie tubes. Yeah, he has to. Yes. Yeah, he has to get them from Russia. That's he has them delivered over from Russia, so they might have like listening devices implanted in them as well. Yeah. So, Brian, good to see you, man.
great to be back.
Yeah, great to have you back. So, tell me about this tour that you're doing.
It's a world tour.
Try to keep this sucker like up. This.
Oh yeah.
There you go.
How's that?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, it's a world tour. Starts next week in the UK. And then we go everywhere from the South Island in New Zealand all the way to the Arctic Circle, to Svalbard, which is the furthest north that you can go on a commercial aircraft.
Wow.
In the middle, we're in the States for a month, mainly in May. And it's about cosmology and about the questions that cosmology raises. So if you're interested in the science of how did the universe begin, even questions of what may have been there, is the universe eternal? Is there such a thing as before the Big Bang? What is the future of the universe? How does complexity emerge spontaneously in the universe? I mean, we sort of take it for granted that there's a Big Bang and it's all hot and there's just this kind of hot glow stuff. And out of that, spontaneously, in 13.8 billion years, you get something like the Earth with a civilization and life on it. So how does that... Do we know anything about that? I mean, we do. I'm asking the question rhetorically. We know quite a lot about it. So it's really about showing the size and scale of the universe, but addressing those questions that I think everybody has about what does it mean to be human, this tiny little finite life that we lead in a possibly infinite universe. How do you make sense of that?
Well, it's incredibly exciting to me that there's a giant audience for this, and that what Neil deGrasse Tyson had been doing and what a lot of public touring intellectuals are doing now. They're doing these giant theaters, and these people are coming out to see these shows, and we're realizing that there's, I hate to use the term market for this, but there's a demand for this, and there's a lot of people who are incredibly fascinated by this, and it's spreading information, it's spreading knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, it's in the UK particularly. I mean, do Wembley Arena, for example. Wow. You're talking about 10,000 people, 12,000 people in these shows. And you're right, they are coming. Although they're big shows, spectacular screens and all that. They're coming to think. They're coming to hear about what we know about the universe and nature. And I think I'm not surprised people are interested, because these are questions that everybody asks. I mean, just why am I here? Everybody's sat there asking that question. But my point is that there is a framework. There's a framework of knowledge. There are things we know about the universe. So it is true that scientists are not going to tell you why you're here. They're not going to tell you what the meaning of life is. But there is actually there are things you need to know if you want to start to explore those questions for yourself. I mean, you need to know that there are 2 trillion galaxies in the observable universe. You need to know that the Milky Way galaxy has got 200 billion stars. Most of those stars now we know have planetary systems. We estimate there are something like 20 billion Earth-like planets, or potentially Earth-like planets, in the Milky Way galaxy alone. So if you're asking questions about what is my place in the universe, you need to know those things. First of all, it's a framework within which you can think.
When you get to those numbers, when you're talking about trillions and billions and all those zeros, my brain just goes numb. There's this lack of comprehension that I'm well aware of. Like, those numbers get thrown about, I go, 200 billion. And it's just,
I think everybody does. I think every scientist no scientist can picture that number. I mean, even the small number, 200 billion, which is the number of stars in one galaxy. And then when you say 2 trillion galaxies, that's. I challenge anyone to be able to picture that. But it is the reality that we've observed. We haven't counted all 2 trillion, by the way. We have a thing called the Sloan Digital Sky Survey, which maps the positions of galaxies. So you know how much of the sky you've surveyed, and you know how many galaxies you've counted, and then you can spread that across the wider universe, and you get this picture of a vast and possibly infinite universe. We know that the universe, or very strongly suspect that the universe is much bigger than the piece we can see. So we have good reason to think that's the case. Whether it's infinite or not is another question. And then that goes to your, can you picture infinity? Well, no one can picture infinity. There's a weird thing as well that, we say the universe began 13.8 billion years ago. So that's a measurement. So because we can measure the speed that all the galaxies are flying away from us, essentially, and then you can run time backwards, if you like, to find out when they were all on top of each other. And so it's quite a simple measurement, and we've done that. So we say the universe began 13.8 billion years ago. But actually, all we know really was the universe was very hot and very dense at that time. And we have some theories that the universe was in existence before that, and perhaps some sort of circumstantial evidence. And that means that actually the universe could have always been eternal. And when I talk to people sometimes, some people get upset about that. Some people would rather it had a beginning. And the idea that it might have been around forever is more frightening somehow than the fact that it began. No, it's interesting the way that people's minds work. What terrifies you the most, an eternal universe or a finite universe?
Yeah, they're both incomprehensible. The eternal universe, if there was an eternal universe, does that negate the theory of the Big Bang, or does it mean that there's a constant cycle of Big Bangs and then expansion and then recompression? Or
yeah, it could do. So those theories are back in vogue. Some of those theories are back in vogue again. So yes, some of them say that there's a cycling universe. So the Big Bang is an event when space gets very hot and very dense and filled with particles. And that may happen again. Or some of the other theories, there's a theory called eternal inflation, which is a theory that, and it's actually the most popular theory, I think, at the moment, for what happened, for why the Big Bang is the way that it is. But it's got some very special features, the Big Bang, which we could talk about. But inflation is the idea that space-time was around before the Big Bang, and it was expanding extremely fast. And it was doubling in size, in the most popular of these theories, every 10 to the minus 37 seconds, which is 0.00037 noughts, 1 of a second. So it's an unimaginably fast expansion. And then the idea is that draws to a close, so quite naturally sort of dies away and the expansion slows down. And all the energy that was taken, that was causing that expansion, sort of gets dumped into space and heats it up and makes particles, and that's what we call the Big Bang. And those theories, the slight extensions of those, say that slowing down just happens in little patches. So most of the universe, the overwhelming majority of the universe, is still inflating at that insane sort of speed. And just little patches stop and they're Big Bangs. So you get multiple universes, a multiverse. It's called the inflationary multiverse. And we are in one of those bubbles. And that's one of the more popular theories.
That's another one. I mean, right now, I'm aware of what you're saying. I can sort of visualize it in some sort of a graphic form, but it's incomprehensible. incomprehensible. Like my mind doesn't have the capacity to expand this sense of distance and size to that grasp. Is this because of just the way we evolved here on Earth to deal with the space that's in front of us, and now over the course of industrial civilization and education, we're now grasping these concepts that are so alien to the reality, the tangible reality that we exist in every day?
I'm sure that's right. Even very simple things, like you go back to the Greeks, so Aristotle and the great, very clever people, but they thought the Earth was at the centre of the universe. Why? Because it feels like it's at the centre of the universe. It feels like we're not moving. And that's quite a deep point, actually, in physics. It's like, why is it that we're flying around relative to the sun very fast at whatever speed it is, 18 miles a second or something like that, and the whole solar system is going around the Milky Way galaxy and so on? Why is it that we don't feel it? And the Greeks quite naturally said, well, because we're at the centre of the universe. They also said everything falls towards the Earth, so therefore the Earth must be at the centre. It's natural.
Right.
And actually it's quite a deep thought to understand why it doesn't feel that we're moving. You have to go all the way to Einstein, really, for someone to take that very seriously. And he said, well, this... there's a great little explanation in Stephen Hawking's Brief History of Time about this, that the idea that you can't tell whether you're moving or not demolishes the notion of absolute space. So if we think about space, if I said space to you or most people, I suppose, you'd think the way that Newton did, of a big box within which things happen. And that's a natural picture of space in the universe, isn't it? It's a thing in which all the planets and galaxies are placed. But in the Brief History of Time, Hawking says, well, imagine bouncing a ball. So we bounce a ball on the table now, a tennis ball. So I drop it and I catch it again. So let's say I drop it and it takes a second to bounce up. So in that second, the Earth has moved about 18 miles or so in space around the sun. So you could ask the question, did that ball return to the same place in space or not? And the answer is, you can't answer it. It does from our perspective, but from the perspective of someone watching the Earth go all the way around the sun, when I caught it again, it had moved 18 miles. And then from some other perspective, it would have done something else. So the point is, you can't say this is a point in space. It came back to the same place, because that just depends on your perspective. It depends on whether you're watching the Earth go around the sun or whatever it is. So Einstein said that means there's no such thing as absolute space. Which kind of follows if you think about it. But that's it's a cool but difficult thought process.
Right. I mean, that's essentially what's happening when you're on a plane. If you're throwing a ball up in the air and catching it on the plane, it's happening at a much smaller scale, right?
Yeah. I mean, you're flying at whatever, 600 miles an hour relative to the ground.
But it doesn't seem like it when you're sitting there.
Yeah, and Einstein elevated that to a principle and said, if you're moving at if you're not accelerating, you're just moving at a constant speed in a plane, or now. I mean, that's essentially what we're doing now. We're moving around the sun at effectively constant speed. Then you can't tell. So there's no experiment you can do. We could look at the decay of a radioactive nucleus or some electricity and magnetism, or bounce a ball, have a pendulum, whatever it is. And there's no experiment you can do to tell you whether you're moving or not. Therefore, that concept has no meaning, because you can't measure it. And that's led Einstein to relativity. So that's the basis of general relativity, which is our best theory of the universe.
Now, why is it that we think that the known universe is larger than we can observe?
Well, one point is that it's expanding, and we always see the same radiation out there, so the glow of the Big Bang. But there are some deeper reasons. The one, from the theory of inflation, the best way to explain the universe, the properties that we see, is that it's very much bigger than the piece we can see. So, for example, we measure space to be what's called flat. I don't even have to say what's called flat, it is flat. So if you imagine slices of space, let's imagine slices of them at different times. So you just slice the universe and say there's a big sheet, it's like this table.
Okay, like a table.
There's a sheet of space, and there's another sheet, another sheet. And it can have a geometry, right? It can be flat like a tabletop, or it could be curved like a sphere, or it could be curved in the opposite direction, sort of like a saddle or a bowl, and we can measure that. And when we measure it, we see it's absolutely flat. And that's a very unusual thing for it to be like. It requires, because what Einstein's theory says is that the shape of space, that the curvature of space is determined by the stuff that's in it. That's basically Einstein's theory of general relativity. Put stuff in space and it curves it and bends it and warps it and stretches it and so on. And what we find is that there's precisely the right amount of stuff in the universe to have a completely flat universe. And the explanation, the most favoured explanation for that, is the universe is way bigger than the piece we can see. And so it's like looking at a piece of the Earth. If you look at a little 1 mile square of the Earth, then it's flat. You have to look at big distances, kind of order the radius of the Earth, bigger than 1 kilometre anyway, or 1 mile, to see that actually you're on a curved surface. And that's one of the ideas about the universe and why it appears to be the way that it is, because it's way, way bigger. So we're just looking at a little piece, and that's why it looks flat. And that's one of the ideas.
Now, when you say flat, like that, my brain doesn't understand this. Because from our perspective, when you look up at the Milky Way, you see all these stars all over the place. So if you're saying flat, like how much height and what are you saying
so
in terms of like the way to measure it?
The best way to think about it is not to think of 3 dimensions of space, because then we can't picture it.
Okay.
But you can think of 2, like this tabletop, and that's all right. We just forget the other one for now. And so you know what flat is on this table. I mean, you could define it. So you could say, for example, that if I draw a triangle on the top of the table, then all the angles add up to 180 degrees. So that actually defines flat. If you did that on the surface of the Earth with a big triangle, then the angles wouldn't add up to 180 degrees. Or you could draw a circle and say, what's pi? So pi is the ratio of the circumference of a circle to its diameter. That's only true on a flat surface. It's different if the surface is curved. So you can define flatness.
So when you're saying flatness, what is the height and what is the width? Like if you're talking about it as if it's a table, there must be some sort of there's a dimension to it, correct?
Oh yeah, there's a third dimension of space,
right.
But the same applies. It's just a generalization of geometry then. So you can the point is we can picture it in 2 dimensions, but you can draw. You can quite literally, you can imagine sending light beams out, and we do this measurement actually. We can look at the most distant light we can see, which is something called the cosmic microwave background radiation, which is, if you imagine looking out, if you look at the Andromeda galaxy, which we can see with the naked eye here in LA, you can see that. It's the most distant object you can see with the naked eye, and it's about 2 million light years away or so, which means the light took 2 million years to get to us. So it's a long way away, but it's very big. So as you look further out into the universe to more and more distant galaxies, you're looking further back in time. As you look at something that's 1 billion light years away, then the light took 1 billion years to get to us. So you see it as it was 1 billion years in the past. And we can actually look so far out that we can see almost back to 13.8 billion years ago, which is very close to the Big Bang. So we can look to light that began its journey before there were galaxies. And that's the oldest light in the universe, which is, by the way, one of the pieces of evidence when people say, I don't believe in the Big Bang. The answer is, well, you can see it. So it's just there. You can see it. We have pictures of it. That light, it turns out that there are sort of structures or ripples in that light, which we can use as a ruler. So quite literally, as a ruler on the sky. And then because that light's been travelling through the universe, we can see how that ruler has been distorted as the light has travelled through space. And so we can infer whether space is flat or curved or how it's warped, if you like, just from that measurement. So it's a beautiful measurement.
Is it possible that in the future we'll be able to see past 13.8 billion years?
Not with light.
Not with
because
light.
What the picture is that before, it actually was released 380,000 years after the Big Bang. It's a very precise number. You might say, how do you know that? Well, before that time, the universe was so hot that atoms couldn't form. So you had a soup of electrically charged particles. It was just too hot for electrons to go into orbit around nuclei. So the universe was opaque to light. So you just couldn't. It was like almost like a big glowing star, if you like. And then when it was expanding, it cooled past the point where the atoms could form. And at that point, it becomes transparent, really almost instantly in a cosmic timescale. And so the light could then travel in straight lines through the universe, and we can see that light. So we see the light from that time, but further back than that, it's opaque, so you can't see past that with light. But you can, potentially, with gravitational waves, which is this measurement that got the Nobel Prize a couple of years ago, the LIGO experiment here in the United States. And it looks for ripples in the fabric of space and time. And in principle, if we had a big enough detector, you could see the ripples from the Big Bang. So you could take an image of the Big Bang in gravitational waves, which would be... Well, you need an enormous sort of space-based detector that we're not going to build anytime soon.
Now, obviously, this is all through equipment and technology that's been invented over the last few hundred years and perfected. Is it possible that things could get better and you could get some ability to detect things even in a far more distant way?
Yeah, I mean, gravitational waves are incredible. I mean, Einstein predicted them in 1915. Never thought they'd be detected because you need such a you need lasers. They didn't have lasers. But the thing, LIGO, this experiment, which is half near Seattle in Washington State and half in Louisiana. So they've got two detectors. And they're basically sort of, 3-mile long laser beams that just sit and measure the sort of stretching and squashing of space as the ripples in the fabric of the universe go through. And what they've been observing are collisions of black holes. So you can imagine how extreme, like a colliding black holes. It's an incredibly extreme event. So it shakes the fabric of the universe, and the ripples come across the universe. And these laser beams, which are just basically rulers, can detect it. They just sort of ring almost, like, just vibrate as the ripples go through in space and time. Kip Thorne, he got the Nobel Prize last year for this. He was one of the greatest living physicists. So I once saw him describe it as a storm in time. So you've got a time storm. It's a beautiful image. So that technology is incredible because the change in length, I can't remember the exact number, but it's way, way, way less than the diameter of an atomic nucleus. So the change in length of the beams, it's tiny measurement, but we can do it.
So this the collision of black holes, the idea that you can detect that.
Yeah. The first paper they published, there are two black holes and they were about 30 times the mass of the sun each. And they were orbiting each other and spiraling in towards each other. And they accelerated. At one point they were approaching each other at 1/3 the speed of light. And they accelerated to 2/3 the speed of light. I can't remember, it's 2 or 3 of them now, and also 2 neutron stars colliding. We saw that as well with it. So it's an incredible machine, which is why it got the Nobel Prize.
Now, there's a supermassive black hole at the center of every galaxy.
Yeah.
But there's also other black holes that aren't necessarily in the center of galaxies.
Yeah, so these little ones, they're a few times the mass of the sun, and they're from collapsed stars. So they are stars at the end of their life, very bigger than the sun, more massive than the sun. But they run out of their fuel and they start to collapse because gravity squashes them. And if they're sufficiently massive, then there's nothing that can stop the collapse. And so they collapse, as far as we know, to a point, right? Essentially an infinitely dense point. We don't really know what happens we don't know what happens right in the middle. But they collapse to such an extent that there's a region around it from which light can't escape, and so nothing can escape, and that's a black hole.
And what happens to them? Do they travel? Are they moving through space?
Yeah, they're still stars,
right?
So they're still there. They're surrounded this region where if you fall in, it's called the event horizon, and if you go across that horizon, then you are going to the center. There's one way of thinking about it, which is quite cool, which is that the time and space sort of flip is one way to think about it. So in the same way that we are going into the future now, so we're going to tomorrow. There's nothing we can do about it. We are going to tomorrow. In the same way, if you fall in across the event horizon of a black hole, you are going to the middle, the singularity it's called. So that's your future. Every line of your future points to the center of the black hole. So it's kind of ultimate no escape, the ultimate prison. You're going to get squashed to an infinitely dense point.
Not every star becomes a black hole at the end of its life?
No, because if something like the sun,
we have a small star.
It's quite small, yeah. And when it collapses, there's a sort of a pressure, a force, if you like, which is caused by the fact that electrons don't like to be very close to each other. So it's called the Pauli exclusion principle. But essentially what happens is that, so as they get squashed closer and closer together, they move faster and faster to sort of get out of each other's way, if you like. And that makes a force which holds them up. And so that creates what's called a white dwarf star. So you can have a blob of matter. They're about the size of the Earth, but they're about the mass of the Sun. And so that's for smaller stars. They end up as these white dwarf things, which are very dense objects. There's another version, which is called a neutron star, which is the same thing, but for neutrons. And they move faster and faster. So if it's massive enough that it overwhelms the electron thing, then the electrons sort of crush into protons and turn into neutrons, and the whole thing starts again. And so a neutron star can be, at least 1.5 times the mass of the Sun, let's say, but it can be about 10 miles across. So that's an incredibly dense ball of matter held up by the neutrons moving around. It's got a fancy name. It's called neutron degeneracy pressure, but that's what it is. But if you go even bigger, then even that can't hold it up. And as far as we know, then there's no known force that we know of that can hold the thing up if it's too massive. And so that's when it just almost winks out of existence, if you like. It collapses and collapses and collapses. And that's when you get a black hole.
We try to put that into perspective. The Sun is 1,000,000 times bigger than the Earth.
Yeah.
And this neutron star is, would you say, 1.5 times the mass of the Sun,
so
but 10 miles wide?
Yeah. So, and there's loads of those around. They're called pulsars. So we see those all over the place. The first one that was discovered was called LGM1 because they spin very fast. And it was called LGM1 because it's a very regular pulse, and they thought it was Little Green Men. So they called it kind of jokingly Little Green Men 1. And so yeah, we've seen that there's one called the Crab pulsar, which is in the Crab.
pitiful display. Surrender to authority, defender of the bastion. A moldy and pitiful display.
That's the wrong target.
A moldy and pitiful display. A moldy and pitiful display. Thy persistence merits consideration. I shall redouble my effort. A moldy and pitiful display.
Target is too far away.
Shall not fall. A moldy and pitiful display.
Target selected.
A moldy and pitiful display.
Nebula, which we saw the supernova explosion. So that's when one of these stars explodes at the end of its life and then collapses to form a neutron star. And we saw that in 1054 AD.
Wasn't there some speculation that our solar system at one point was a binary star system, and that one of those stars had become a dwarf?
I don't know.
Someone had read something about that in relationship to the dense object they believe is outside the Kuiper Belt.
Yeah, I mean, there's some evidence. There's a bit of evidence that there's something out there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because of the periodic extinctions and things on Earth, like you get periodic bombardments from out in the Kuiper Belt. So yeah, I think one of the theories is
periodic extinctions.
Well, yeah. So for example, like there have been mass extinctions on Earth when a lot of the life died, and we don't know what caused all those, but sometimes they're impacts from space. That seems clear. And so, yeah, there are theories that there's something orbiting out there which can disrupt all these objects out in the Kuiper Belt, that sends loads of comets and asteroids inwards to the inner solar system and can cause havoc. And so there's some people look at those theories. I mean, I don't know. It's one of those, it is a possibility that there's something out there.
The speculation was that there's something out there, correct me if I'm wrong, something called a galactic shelf, like that it gets to a certain space and it indicates that there's something far larger out there?
Yeah. I mean, I think, I don't know the exact about the stellar-sized or mass objects out there. I don't know that. I mean, there are some sort of suggestions there's another planet out there, a big planet, for example. But you're right. There can be stuff orbiting way beyond the Kuiper Belt, and we're talking, a light year away or something like that now.
It's interesting because it's incomprehensible, the distance, right, in our minds, how far that must be out past what we used to call Pluto. But for whatever reason, that becomes more interesting because it's in our neighborhood. Whereas if they find some distant star system and that it might have a planet that's similar to Earth, that doesn't seem as compelling for whatever weird reason.
No, yeah. I mean, I think the planets around Alpha Centauri and Proxima Centauri, which are the closest stars, it seems like there are planets around those now. And I think that was interesting because we could conceive of going there.
Right.
I mean, there was this idea, Stephen Hawking actually and some others, before he died, had this idea called Breakthrough Starshot, which is the idea to send a little probe out to the Alpha Centauri system. And I think in their view, Yuri Milner as well, the entrepreneur, wanted to do that. And I think it's something like 100 years travel time or something with our current technology. And they pointed out that we don't do that now. We don't think 100 years in the future. But if you go back when people were building cathedrals, people used to routinely start projects that would take 100 years to bear fruit. Yeah. And so we could imagine going there. And that then becomes fascinating, I think, because then you've got a solar system, another solar system that you could go and visit, conceivably.
Conceivably. Yeah, I mean, what kind of speed are we talking and how long would it take to get there?
Well, yeah, I mean, so it is. I think the idea was about 100 years to get there. So it's going 4 light years or so in 100 years, so whatever that turns out.
So you would have to essentially do what they did in like the Ridley Scott Alien film and put people into some sort of a...
Oh, yeah, a robot probe. It wouldn't be a crewed probe.
Wouldn't be possible for a crew?
Well, it is.
But you'd have to freeze them?
Yeah, that's always, when you talk to engineers, you had Elon on, didn't you?
Yes.
Engineers always say, physicists go, well, it's possible in principle, so over to you. You do it now. There are no laws of physics that tell us we can't do it, so we just do it.
Right.
But, it's...
That's a weird relationship between the physicists and the engineers.
Yeah. But yeah, in principle, you're right. If you can send a little robot spaceship there, you can send a crewed spaceship there.
I'm of the opinion as time goes on and augmented and virtual reality gets better and better that it doesn't really totally make sense unless we're talking about colonizing someplace to send biological life to another planet. And if we can send some probe that doesn't have to worry about the biology being affected by radiation or by the speed of travel or even by food, we can send something out there and almost be there by virtue of, goggles, virtual reality goggles or something else.
Yeah, you hear that. in science, at the moment, space science, we have this debate a lot, actually, because, of course, space probes like Curiosity that's on Mars at the moment, that's really cheap compared to sending people to Mars. And so quite often the scientists who want to find out about the world will say, well, we should spend it on robots. We shouldn't spend it on people. I think crewed space exploration is, in some ways, I mean, it's clearly true at the moment that humans can do more than robots, so we can explore the place better.
For now.
Yeah, but I think it has to be, it's about something else. I mean, it's about, and it's not only, it's about living and working off the planet, which I think is quite a persuasive argument, actually. We've already industrialized near-Earth orbit. So it's already a multi-billion-dollar industry, communication satellites and weather satellites, GPS, whatever. We're already up there. And so learning to live and work in space is, I think, a natural extension of our civilization. Plus the fact, if you talk to Elon or Jeff Bezos, they point out that the amount of resources available just slightly above our heads is vast. And so I remember I talked to Jeff Bezos actually once, and he thinks really simply, and he said, for example, in the asteroid belt, there's enough metal, I think, to build a skyscraper. What is it? It's something like 800 stories tall and cover the Earth in it, right? If you want. Now, we don't want to do that. But his point was that the energy from the sun is all up there, the resources are up there. So you could almost imagine trying to zone the Earth residential at some point in the future to protect the planet and do your heavy industry off the planet, for example. And this sounds like science fiction, except that now SpaceX and Blue Origin, those people have got reusable rockets. So suddenly the economics become sensible. So I think expansion is good. And I think we will expand, and I think we will expand outwards, because there's not much room left on this planet to expand. So I think we'll do. So, but that's a whole different idea. It's not about gathering scientific information. It's about a frontier and all the benefits that come from operating as a civilization on a frontier, which we've sort of lost on the Earth because there is no frontier left. And so I like that idea that Mars. And when you talk about Mars, especially with Elon, he's right that that's the only place you can go. So there is no other planet we can go to other than Mars. You can't go to Jupiter or Saturn. You can't go to Mercury or Venus. So if we want to go somewhere and expand our civilization, it has to be Mars. And everything's there that you need. So, but that's a different thing to saying you want to find out stuff. You're right. If we just want to find out stuff, then you send robots.
But as far as expanding actual civilization and bringing it to another place, one of the things that freaks me out is people get depressed about living in Seattle. I mean, you're going to live on Mars?
I wouldn't. I agree with you.
Yeah.
It'd be a horrendous thing. It's like it'd be like the Western frontier. It's the frontier when people cross the states.
Yeah.
An incredibly dangerous thing to do.
But when people cross the states, they still got to Wyoming and beautiful places and Colorado and.
Yeah. But it was hard.
Yes.
I wouldn't have wanted to do it.
But once you got there, there's a river and there's trout in the river and the meadows are green and
it's right. I mean, I agree with you, right? I mean, I'm not going to go there till there are vineyards and hotels and things. But however, it is true that there are people who like the challenge. And what is true about Mars? It's interesting actually because we know something about the history of Mars now, quite a lot about the history of Mars, and it's certainly clear that there was water. Almost certainly oceans and rivers. So, and that water is almost certainly still there. So I would say certainly still there.
Well, they have found large quantities of ice now, right?
Yeah, so there's certainly ice. There may even be pockets of liquid water below the surface somewhere. So couple that with all the minerals and the resources that we know are there, and you have everything you need. So that's the thing about Mars. It's quite nice relative to everywhere else other than the Earth. You can't go to Venus. Right? You just melt. It's, 400 and something degrees and 90 atmospheric pressure.
Yeah.
So Mars is quite nice. But I wouldn't go there. I agree with you.
What's the gravity of Mars in relationship to the Earth?
It's about a third, I think.
Third.
Right, yeah, something like that.
So it would still have a significant weakening effect. Like if you went to Mars and then somehow or another in the future they were able to get back to Earth, your body would have a real problem with that, right?
It would, but there is still gravity. Maybe it's a bit more than a third. I can't quite remember, but it's something like that. But yeah, so there's still gravity. So there's gravity. There's some protection from you'd probably want to live in the caves actually, or something like that. Because there's no magnetic field there, so it's quite a high radiation environment, but not too bad. It's further from the sun than we are. It's not too. There are places on Mars. There's a very deep crater called Hellas, which is a big impact basin, and at the bottom, it's so deep you could fit Everest in it. So you put Mount Everest in there, the summit of Everest wouldn't reach the rim of the crater. So it's something like, I don't know what it is, 7 miles deep or something, 6 miles deep. So you could go there, and at the bottom, the atmospheric pressure is so high that you could just about have liquid water occasionally on the floor of that crater. And
So
it's
if they were
quite
gonna
warm
go-
sometimes. It can be 20 degrees.
Really?
Yeah, there, Celsius.
Wow. That's better than Minnesota right now.
Exactly.
Minnesota's experiencing a serious cold front.
That's right. Yeah. So it can be warmer than Minnesota, and so there are places where it's not horrendous on Mars. So the Martian is kind of realistic in that sense.
Sort of.
Bits of it.
Do you watch those movies and shake your head?
I like them. I
Do you?
like science fiction.
Right.
So yeah, I don't sit there. I grew up with Star Wars. That was when I was 9 years old or something like that.
It's
So I don't
funny
sit there
watching
going,
it
I just
now.
don't. Yeah, I'm not having this. I had an argument with Neil deGrasse Tyson, not an argument, but a debate with him about lightsabers once, because I claimed that they're physically, that in principle, they're possible. And he was trying to say that they aren't, but they are.
Would it have to loop back around because the light's not continuing to, like, the fact that it goes to a certain distance and pauses?
We'd have to have a mirror or something, I guess, yeah.
Something
That's
would have
true.
to be the end of it, right?
That's true. So it'd be a different kind of lightsaber. The only point I was making is that photons, particles of light, can bounce off each other. So we see that in really high energy experiments in particle accelerators, we can collide photons together. So my point was a bit of a pedantic physicist one, but it is because it is true that light can bounce off it, can hit light,
Right.
but very, very high energy.
But when they press that button, it goes zoom to a certain distance.
Yeah. That's engineering.
Right.
No, I agree with you. The distance thing doesn't work. Yeah,
there's
I
no
agree.
mass to it, right? So as you're swinging it around, you wouldn't have the leverage of a long thing. So why not make like you could stab someone with a lightsaber a mile away.
That's true. Yes,
right?
True. Well, that's just a laser, isn't it?
Yes. Like
I suppose.
why make it so short?
Yeah, I
It's
agree.
ridiculous. You have to swing. You have to be close to hitting a person with it. That's a silly design.
You are picking holes correctly in the engineering part of mine. The only point I was making is the physics is that, which I think is quite interesting, is that light can bounce off light.
Yes.
That's the point.
So, but there would have to be something that causes it to stop at the very end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which would be, you're right, it'd have a mirror, but it wouldn't look cool, would it, if there was a kind of thing with them?
Well, what drives me crazy about Star Wars is not the lightsabers, it's the lasers when they're shooting the guns. I'm like, why can I see that when I can't see bullets?
Yeah.
We're supposed to be way faster than a bullet.
Yeah.
Like, why is it easy to see this? Because it's like, you can duck. You can get out of the way of those things.
They're really slow, aren't they?
They're so slow.
Yeah.
I would be so angry. I'd be like, this is so dumb. I could go warp speed in this Millennium Falcon and travel the speed of light, but for whatever reason, these lasers are so slow that you could duck out of the way of them. That's so dumb.
And it's not only Star Wars, is it? It's everything. Every single film does that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, it's like films like. Also, I worked on one of these films years ago, Sunshine.
Oh, that was a
with Danny
great
Boyle.
movie. Very underappreciated movie.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a brilliant film. But in that, so they asked me, or Danny said, I want to do it right, so I'll do the spacecraft without any sound. So when it's traveling through space, it'll be silent. And it looks shit. You know, just when you watch it. It's the same when you try and film astronauts and they're in zero G and they always move slowly.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, why? You know, you're right. You don't.
Right, you'd be able to
zero
move
G, you
very
can
fast.
as fast as you want.
Yeah.
But it looks silly. So there's kind of I suppose it's what audiences have got used to over the years. And so in the end, you have and the spacecraft goes past. Apart from 2001, which didn't do it.
Yeah.
It was silent in 2001.
Well, Kubrick was a stickler for science and he would do complex mathematics in his spare time. What a fascinating guy that must have been.
Yeah. I read that they just someone just found an interview, didn't they, the other day, where he explained the ending of 2001.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, I saw it yesterday actually, and it was kind of a really simple version of it. He just said, well, the super intelligent beings take him in and put him in a zoo, basically, and watch him grow old, and then send him back to the Earth as a super being. No, but that's the worst explanation at the end of 2001 I've ever heard. But it was Kubrick's. That's what Kubrick said. So he falls into the monolith. Yeah, they just put him in this room, which is kind of a bad version of a French chateau or something. Watch him grow old, and then send him back to the Earth as a super being.
Wow. Okay.
That was Kubrick's version.
How strange. It's a weird genre, right? Because sometimes people get things right. Like, didn't H.G. Wells predict a significant amount of scientific inventions in the future?
Well, there was his. I mean, it depends which one, doesn't it? There was a moon one, wasn't there? He did a journey to the moon. I mean, his time machine is not
right. That
we're not going to be able to do that.
Really worked out yet?
No. but yeah. I think it's. I always like science fiction.
Yeah.
I like Arthur C. Clarke a lot. Because I think it is. You're right. It's a form that you can let your imagination wander and address things without restriction. I think.
Did you like the Alien series?
I loved it.
Yeah.
I saw Alien when I was at school. It was 1979, right? And we had a school film club. And in the 70s, they weren't like they are now. So the first films they put on, the 3 films, I was 11. And it was Alien, Apocalypse Now, and Life of Brian.
Wow.
So that was my introduction to cinema.
Wow. Well, those are 3 great choices. But I feel like Ridley Scott's original Alien is probably one of the greatest horror science fiction movies of all time, and one of my all-time favorite movies. But I really like the newer ones as well. Like I like Prometheus, and I really liked Covenant, the last one.
Yeah, Prometheus. I don't know.
It's not the best one.
I love
kind of like what they're trying to do with it. The whole idea about the engineers coming back in time, and
that's why I was disappointed with it, because I thought the setup, the opening is brilliant, and I thought this is just going to be brilliant. Right. And then I thought it just lost its way, and it was a disappointment because it could have been so brilliant.
Yes, I agree with you. Yeah, the beginning was fantastic, but I think Covenant was more exciting, and it's also preposterous. Like, if you went to another planet, like, the last thing you'd be doing is just breathing in the air, right? I mean, we'd have to be really if there was a life on the planet, we'd have to be really careful, A, not to contaminate, but B, not to be contaminated, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's also, I mean, the other thing in science fiction films is gravity, because you always, even in Alien, you always just say the spaceship's got gravity. Again, there's only 2001.
Right.
Where everybody floats around.
Yeah.
Because all has a spinning thing.
Right. The spaceship has gravity, and then when you land, the gravity is exactly like Earth.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, but it's...
No. It's ridiculous. Yeah. I mean, what are the odds that you would find a planet that is exact... Like, even if a planet was 1.5 times the size of Earth, it would have far more gravity, right? And that's really common for a planet to be, like, just a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
And then we would be like, fuck, everywhere we'd be walking, we'd be getting crushed, right?
I agree with you.
Yeah.
But I suppose that's not the point. It's about ideas, isn't it, science fiction?
Yes, and, this whole idea where you're just supposed to let the story play out. And
yeah. Well, I mean, Sunshine was, the premise is silly. I mean, the premise is the sun is dying, and we're going to go and fix it.
Yeah.
So both of those things, it fails on its first line in terms of realism. But the idea is that it's not about that. It's about the sun as a god in some ways. So it's about our response to the power of nature, and it's about deifying this thing and worshipping it, and how ultimately you go mad. If you remember the film, there's Pinbacker, who's the first captain that went to the first mission to go and restart the sun, which is the mad bit, but then became a religious fundamentalist, essentially, and then decided, it's a fascinating idea that he decides to bring meaning to his life. He will become the last man, the last human. And so he wants to be the last. He wants the sun to die, and he wants it to take humanity with it. And he decides to make that happen, so he stays there, waiting for the second ship. And I like those ideas that, what's your reaction to the power of nature? And this happens in It's one of the things I do in my shows. I'm not being a commercial person. I've just thought of it. One of the great things about cosmology is that it is terrifying in the truest sense of the word. I mean, we talked a bit about the size and scale of the universe and black holes colliding and those things. You know, it is very frightening, but also I think the act of trying to understand our place in nature and the size and scale of the universe and our tiny presence within it is valuable. It's so that you can be terrified but also inspired and interested. And it's part of, if you want to ask questions about what it means to be human and means to be alive, then I think you find the answers in confronting that reality, which is that we live in a terrifyingly vast universe. The powers in the universe that we cannot comprehend, as you said. But that's what you've got to face, because that's reality. So you can't hide your head in the sand and just duck it. And it can send some people crazy.
I'm sure. And it is really interesting that we need that suspension of disbelief in order to sort of make a film on space. You almost have to like go, well, this isn't really how it would be, but this is how you have to make it in order to fit it into a 2-hour movie.
Yeah. And then the film, as with Sunshine, becomes about. Then you can have the film about something else.
Yes,
because it's not really about that.
Well, did you like Event Horizon?
Yeah, I did actually. I thought that was quite a cool film. Yeah.
Ridiculous.
I haven't seen it for years.
I always wanted to ask about their concept of propulsion. That almost like space would be flat, and you would fold space over, and you would intersect those 2 points, and you would be able to travel vast distances instantaneously, right? I'm doing a terrible job of explaining it, I'm sure. But is that a concept that people have actually considered?
Yeah, you can, in general relativity. So Einstein's, I should say what it is, Einstein's theory of general relativity is our best theory of space and time. And so it really is, as we talked about before, it's you imagine space and time as a sheet. Just imagine it as a thing, sort of literally a sheet, a surface. And all the theory says is that if you put matter and or energy into that, then it curves it and distorts it, and it can stretch it and make it shrink. And so it's the response of space and time to matter and energy. So the simplest version would be the sun. So you put a big spherical ball of stuff in there, and it warps space and time such that the nice straight lines, something just traveling, minding its own business through that warp space, turns into an orbit.
And that's why you can actually kind of see things that are behind the sun?
Yeah. Okay. So light bends around the sun because it's just traveling through the curved space. The Earth goes round the sun because it's just rolling, minding its own business through the curved space. So an example would be, you might say, well, how does curved space, can that give rise to something that looks like a force, which is gravity? So the best analogy I know of is to think of walking around on the surface of the Earth. So if you stand on the equator of the Earth, and you with your friend, and you say, we're going to walk due north. So we're going to set off, let's say we're 1,000 miles apart on the equator, and we're going to walk due north. What's going to happen? So you walk in straight lines. You don't change direction. You don't do any accelerating. But the straight lines are the lines of longitude on the surface of the Earth. So as you go further and further north, you get closer and closer together. And if you carry on to the pole, you bump into each other. But nothing's happened. Right? There's no forces acting. It's just that you're moving on a curved surface. And so you get closer. And that's basically Einstein's theory of general relativity. Now, why did I start talking about that?
Event horizon, the idea of folding.
Oh, yeah. So all you have to do, so that those folded kind of geometries, is you have to try and specify where you would put the matter and what kind of stuff you'd put there to make the geometry fold in that way. And you can do it. So you can write down that geometry. It's called a warp drive geometry, I think it's called. It's in textbooks. So you can do that to have a warp drive. The question becomes, what sort of stuff would you have to actually put into the real universe to make it warp in that way? And it usually turns out that it's the kind of stuff that doesn't exist, right? But it has properties. It's sort of matter or sort of energy that has properties that do not exist in nature as far as we can tell. But you can still write the geometry down in Einstein's theory.
So if you had
the
significant
stuff,
force or mass or whatever it is, if you had that stuff that doesn't exist, it is a concept that
so the geometry exists. So you can do it, and you can do the calculations, and you can see the warp drive. You can construct wormholes that connect distant regions of the universe, which you could use as time machines. You can do all that in the theory, but in nature, you'd have to have the right stuff to do it.
But that stuff is not real.
That seems to be
as far as we know.
Yeah.
Now, what would have to happen? Like, you would have to have enough power or mass to be able to fold those two things together.
It tends to be weird stuff, like stuff that has a negative pressure or something like that. So stuff that has physical properties that are just bizarre, and that no matter or energy that we know of in the universe has. So that to make the geometry happen.
But it's conceivable in theory that this could exist, even though it doesn't.
It's a debate ultimately. So wormholes are a good example. So that would be quite literally. We talked about the surface of the Earth. So you fly to Australia from LA, and you have to go quite a long way around the edge of the Earth, or you could tunnel straight through and get there quicker, right? So you can, that's a wormhole.
Jamie's got a little graphic up there.
There it is. There's a wormhole. So you could go all the way around the edge, or you could take the shortcut. So the question is, so you can do that in Einstein's theory. You can write down that geometry, and there it is. So the first question is, can you make it? And as we said, we don't think that stuff exists.
Right.
There's a second set of bits of theoretical work, which are, if you had a wormhole, then what would happen if you tried to travel through it? And what seems to happen is that they become unstable the moment that anything tries to go through. So you get kind of a feedback of stuff going through and through and through and through, and so it collapses. And there's a great book by Kip Thorne, actually. We just mentioned him. He got the Nobel Prize last year for the gravitational waves, and he wrote a brilliant book, I think it's in the 80s, called Black Holes and Time Warps, where he talks about the answer is we don't fully know, but most physicists think that even if they existed, they would be unstable. And as soon as you even tried to transmit information through them, send a bit of light through, then there would be this sort of feedback and they'd collapse. And ultimately, the reason we don't really know absolutely is because you need what's called a quantum theory of gravity, and we don't have one. So we don't have the theoretical tools to be absolutely sure that these things would be unstable or don't exist in nature. But we strongly suspect that they don't. If they did, you could build a time machine. So Stephen Hawking wrote a paper called the Chronology Protection Conjecture. And conjecture is the important word. So the conjecture basically was that the laws of nature will be such that you can't have stable wormholes and you can't build time machines.
And if you send something through it, it would destabilize it.
Yeah.
And if it didn't destabilize it, how would your physical body deal with the stress of that?
Well, it doesn't have to be. That you can build them. That's called the tidal gravitational force. So it's the difference in gravitational pull across your body, which is one of the things that gets you if you fall into a black hole. So before you actually get to the singularity, you can get, it's called spaghettified, it's a technical word. So you get, and it's just like the moon's, the tidal effects on the Earth, which are quite small, but they still raise tides on the oceans. So that can be if you think about something like a black hole, that can be a massive difference in gravitational pull from your head to your feet, and so it can stretch you out. And so, but you can with wormholes, you can write the geometry down in Einstein's theory such that you could go through. So you don't have to be destroyed or anything weird happen to you.
Would you have to have something protecting you, some force, some sort of a?
No, you just literally you fall through. I mean, if they would exist, you just go through. You sit in a little spaceship, but you wouldn't. There's nothing inherently in them that says that you would be ripped apart or anything like that. But
what are your thoughts on alien life, on life outside of this planet? Is this something you think about?
Yeah, I think there must be. Even in the solar system, I would not be surprised if we find microbes on Mars or on some of the moons of Jupiter or Saturn where there's liquid water.
Like Europa.
Yeah. And the reason is that if you think about the reason I think that, and it's a guess, is because if you look at the history of life on Earth, then so Earth formed and it was just there was no life. It was a ball of rock, and almost as soon as it cooled down, we see evidence of life. So certainly 3.8 billion years ago, possibly even further back than that, we see evidence of life on Earth. So somewhere along the line, geochemistry, active geochemistry, became biochemistry on Earth. And we have some idea, that if you get gradients of temperature and acid and alkaline and the conditions that are naturally present on the surface of oceans, then complex carbon chemistry spontaneously happens. So we know that life, almost certainly we know that life began on Earth. I mean, the other option is it came from space or something like that, but it probably didn't. Right? It probably began on Earth. So that means that at least here, that happened. And that we know that the conditions that led to the origin of life on Earth were present on Mars 4 billion years ago. And we know that they're present on Europa today. So I don't see that there's anything special. Life is just chemistry. And the idea that geochemistry becomes biochemistry is not fanciful because it happened here. So I think that given the same conditions, it would be surprising to me if the same thing didn't happen, in that life begins. So that's to test that is one of the great frontiers of science now. It's one of the great challenges, which is why another reason we're interested in Mars, because we know those conditions were there. We know there were what's called hydrothermal vent systems on the floors of oceans on Mars 3.8 or 4 billion years ago. So it would be good to know if what I've said is right. And the way we find out is to find life or evidence of past life.
Are you aware of the speculation that was going around? How recent was it, that Occupy thing, the octopus eggs? There was a group of scientists that were speculating that it's panspermia, the idea of panspermia, that it's possible that octopi had come from somewhere else. Some frozen eggs had actually come from somewhere else and landed on Earth. And these were like legitimate scientists that were contemplating, not morons.
I don't think...
Have you seen this?
No, I didn't. But I mean, I think it's unlikely. So panspermia doesn't have to be unlikely.
Right.
I mean, for example, you might have seen the other day we found an Earth rock on the moon.
Yes.
Right. Well, it's back on Earth now because the Apollo astronauts brought it back, didn't they? It's 4 billion years old or something like that.
One of the oldest rocks ever found.
Yeah.
Right.
So we know that material gets transferred between planets. And so it's not inconceivable that microbes could survive that journey. Right. We know that microbes can survive in space, for example. So that isn't mad. It's probably unlikely, but it's not mad. But with the octopus, I hadn't heard that. But the thing is that the octopus is still extremely similar biologically to us. I mean, the differences are negligible.
Yeah.
So it's still got the same energy system with the things called ATP and DNA and all that stuff. It's all very, very similar.
It was something about RNA and DNA. Did you find that article?
I'm looking at a different one from a different website. It's about the same thing. It has to do with the Cambrian explosion. And there were 33 authors on a paper that got published in the Progress in Biophysics and Molecular Biology that talked about this possibility. There are other people that disagree with it, though.
Right. I mean, I suppose I haven't seen it. So I think it's unlikely because the octopus is extremely similar to us. So that suggests a common origin to me. That I suppose the counter argument you could advance would be there's only one way to do life. So you could say that actually, because the laws of physics and chemistry are the same everywhere. So maybe DNA is the only way to do it. So that's the way it gets done.
Which is why they're so similar to us.
Yeah, so
although so alien as well.
Yeah, they're not though. That's the thing about an octopus. That's why I'm surprised about it, because they're not that alien. They're very similar.
Well, they are in their abilities. I mean, their ability to transform their outer texture and their color almost instantaneously.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they have incredible camouflage abilities that really don't exist in the mammalian world.
Yeah, but on a cellular level, you look at an octopus cell under a microscope and you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between an octopus cell and a human cell.
So the only way that would make sense is if all life comes from basically the same kind of building blocks and just varies depending upon the conditions and where it takes place.
I'm guessing, but yes, that must be the only way you could sustain that, given that they're so similar to us, because they really are, biochemically is that's the only way it can be done, given the building block, the toolkit, the laws of nature, and the elements and so on that we have in our universe.
We have so many different life forms on our planet, but if we found anything that's remotely similar to what we have here on Earth on another planet, it would be such an incredible discovery. Like if we found a frog on the moon, I mean, the world would stop, right?
I'd be very surprised if we found a frog on the moon.
But I mean, if we found anything anywhere that is in any way similar, an insect on Mars.
Well, this is, I mean, as I say, it'd be micro. I think it'd be single-celled things. And remember, I mean, you mentioned the Cambrian explosion. So that is, what we do know about Earth is that although life began, let's say, 3.8 billion years ago, it wasn't until around 600 million years ago or so, or maybe at most 700, that you see any complex multicellular organisms at all. So for something like 3 billion years, it was single-celled alone. And that's one of the reasons why I would guess, if I had to guess, I would say that microbes would be common because life began very quickly on Earth. And I wouldn't be surprised if we find it on Mars. But complex life, multicellular life, insects, plants, intelligence, I would guess would be very rare because it took so long on Earth to get there. And it was just slime. About 3 billion years of slime. It was that was it.
What happened? How did it go from slime to giraffes?
It's and it did it very quickly once it got going. Yeah. And it's one of the great unsolved mysteries in biology. That one thing that is true is that we seem to be, all complex creatures seem to be, we're called eukaryotes, right? Which is cells with a cell nucleus and all that kind of stuff. And they look like they're the merger between two simpler life forms, bacteria and a thing called an archaean. So it looks like somewhere in 2 billion years ago, whatever it was, in some ocean, the bacterium cell got inside the archaean and survived as a symbiotic organism, essentially, and then somehow, unbelievably, managed to reproduce and replicate in that configuration. And that does seem to be the origin of all complex multicellular life on Earth. So it's called the fateful encounter hypothesis. And if that's true, then it's just a bit of luck. And it happened once, right? And that's why we're here.
Now, when
blind luck.
Consider, like, how many billion Earth-like planets did you say exist just in our solar system alone?
In the galaxy, 20 billion, something like that. So 1 in 10 stars.
So the odds of complex life out of our incredibly fortunate situation, but the odds of that occurring on any of these billions of other planets that exist?
We don't know, but let's say the Earth is, let's say it was on the fortunate side. So we're talking about, give or take, 4 billion years, right, from the origin of life to now, and we have a civilization now, and we've had it. Our species has been around, what, 250,000 years or something? So it's just now, basically. So let's say 4 billion is on the fortunate side. Let's say that it was double that, or triple that on the average. Suddenly, that's the age of the universe, right? And that's a third of the age of the universe it took. So how many of those worlds have been stable for 3 or 4 billion years? That's quite a tall order, actually. It looks like our solar system might be quite unusual in that respect, because the planet's got to remain stable, in a stable orbit. The stars got to remain stable,
the
at least in
large
our solar
moon
system.
Helps
large
us.
moon stabilizes. Jupiter plays a big role.
Takes the asteroids, sucks them in.
So, and that, there's a theory called the Grand Tack theory, which is, so it's very hard to explain the evolution of our solar system. So when you do computer models of solar systems, you don't tend to get 4 rocky planets too close to the sun and 4 big gas giants further out. And one of the current best theories, and this, I say this because it shows you how lucky we might be, is that Jupiter, they tend to form these big gas giants and migrate inwards towards the star. So in almost all the computer simulations, just because you've got this big gas giant orbiting in all the dust around the star, they tend to drop inwards. And it looks like Jupiter did that. So it looks like it formed and came in almost to where Mars orbits today. And cleared out the region around Mars, actually, which is maybe the reason Mars is so small compared to the other, to Venus and Earth. But then Saturn was coming in as well. And in the computer models, the interaction between Jupiter and Saturn stops Jupiter coming in before it gets to the Earth. And they both get dragged out again. And so to where they are today.
Oh, wow.
And so that seems to be, it's one of the best theories for the evolution of our solar system. So what are the chances? You know, the chances of that are so minuscule, tiny. So that's the thing I think about these rocky planets. In order to get a civilization on them, I guess you need quite unusual solar systems. And that would be a guess. And you need quite unusual stability on the planet for billions of years. And that's why I think we might be quite lucky.
And how does Bode's law work? Bode's law is a method of detecting, if you look at the mass of a planet, you can accurately detect how much mass and the size of a neighboring planet.
I think it wasn't just the positions of the orbits, I think.
Right, where it is.
Yeah. And it's one thing that is true about our solar system is that if you get the computer simulations, you can't put more planets in. So if you try and put more planets in, it becomes unstable very quickly.
So the mass of, like, if you measure Mars, you can accurately depict where the next planet close to it would be?
It was. I mean, it was. That's what was done. Was it 17th century or something? I can't remember. It was long. Yeah, and it was just one of those things where you notice a pattern.
Right. They were just trying to figure out what the patterns were.
Yeah, so it's just a pattern, which is, there's nothing to that really. Other than to say that most simulations of the solar system, if you put other planets in, they tend to get thrown out by gravitational interactions. So there is a sense in which our solar system has got as much stuff in it as it could have. So the planets are nicely spaced. And you're right, given the mass of them, that depends on how close another planet can be before the interaction goes wrong and it gets thrown out into the intergalactic space or something, because planets do that. You know, we know that planets get thrown out of solar systems